Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode number 50 of the Pico Serenity podcast. I am one of your hosts, Emilson, and as always, I am joined by my co host, Anomaly.
Hello.
And this week, we are joined by Kiev for, I think, the first time to talk about Mythic raid stuff, Mythic raid progression, prep, that kind of thing. But before we get into that, Kiev, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hey, yeah. Thanks for having me. Um, I'm Kiev. I'm a vet in Peak. If you guys haven't seen me before, um, I do the dungeon and raid guides currently, and I raid with Might. Um, been playing since Legion, so not super long. And I've been playing a monk almost that entire time. Started playing monk about halfway through Legion.
Nice. So which boss are you guys currently working on?
We are currently working on council. We have it to 5%, so we've like seen the whole fight.
Just gotta get that
Just
little bit, that last
that
little.
that end is really rough. So we'll get it pretty soon here.
Nice, nice.
Awesome.
Um,
So Legion, wow, you've not played the game for long.
No,
God.
I mean,
So
to like for comparison, the first tier that I rated in any capacity was Emerald Nightmare,
same. Yeah.
and I rated heroic up until Antaurus.
gosh, I rated Upper Blackrock Spire when it was a 40-man raid 15 years
Oh man,
ago.
Anam,
I'm so
gotta
old.
tell us
I
how it
jumped into
is.
the fire. Like
That's true. Yeah.
I started in Emerald Nightmare, like brand new to the game. Just like joined a random normal progression guild because those exist apparently.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And then like moved up to the heroic team, moved up to their mythic team, like within that one tier, and then just like started running with
Oh,
mythic
wow,
rating. So
that's awesome.
yeah. I do think it's interesting now. Like in Legion, the normal progression guild doesn't make a ton of sense, but now in Shadowlands, it actually makes a shocking amount of sense with the way that
Yeah.
the gearing works and the difficulty of content because of that.
Yeah. Well, gearing is in lack of gear
Yeah,
dropping, but
gearing as in
yes.
lack thereof. Yes. Yeah. So today is actually second day of the new year, the first podcast
Yeah.
of 2021.
We made it.
And
Emerson, I'm gonna say one thing before we get into this. I didn't
okay,
think we'd get it past like 10 episodes. I thought
yeah,
like around September timeframe, like 4 or 5 weeks in, I'd just be like, hey, Emerson, I can't do this anymore, man. I can't talk this much. But we made it to the new year,
yeah.
which I think is an accomplishment. When did we start this? I was
We
looking. It
we
was like
did the relaunch in August,
yeah,
beginning
so
of
we
August.
made it like 5 months. So like we're like basically lifers now. So I'm excited. So that's all. I just want to start that off. That I'm
Yeah,
excited that we made it this far to the
yeah.
new year.
No, episode 50 is a good number. Not all of those were since the relaunch, but I have been involved in this since or we relaunched it, and yeah, I think I saw like half of the episodes are since August to give you a sense of how long, like how far apart the episodes were. This podcast has been going on since the beginning of BFA.
Yeah,
We have an episode somewhere on Old Your Bosses.
that's amazing. That's
But
amazing.
yeah. So how was your all's New Year's?
So I'll be the first to say that I fell asleep at 11:30. Did not see the ball drop because I'm old. So that was my New Year's. My wife. So I watched. I will say we watched some. I watched some show with my wife. We hung out. We're like, we'll just watch a show. We'll stay up. Like at 11:15. Like I'm asleep. Netflix is running like episode 12. The last one I remember was like 10 or something. I'm like, we should probably just go to bed. So yeah, I went to bed at 11:30. Did not see the ball drop, but was awoken about 30 minutes later by
By
my
firework.
crazy neighbor down the street shooting off professional fireworks and lighting up the sky. So yeah,
Yeah,
that was my New Year's.
yeah. I also did not see the ball drop. I was awake though. I was just playing some games with my brothers on Steam and did not care about the ball drop. So I guess you're too old to stay up. I'm too young to care.
Kia, please tell me you watched it. Please tell me you watched Dick Clark's Rockin' New Year's Eve.
I spent my New Year's Eve in Keystones.
Oh no.
I
That's
was
awesome.
doing keys all night till like 3 a.m. So I was awake, but that's our preferred way to spend New Year's around here.
Nice. Very cool.
Solid
Yeah, that's
choice.
hilarious. Yeah,
Solid
definitely fell
choice.
asleep though. It was great. It was great.
But aside from New Year's, we also had a bunch of other things happen this week. You want to walk us through it, Anam?
Yeah, so this was actually a crazy week. There's a bunch of stuff that sort of happened. So first up, we did have our sort of rounding out the top 5 and even top 7 in terms of Denathrius kills. So we had basically world 3 through 7 done. Congratulations to Pieces getting third, Fat Shark yes, getting fourth. Who like my personal favorite, love those guys. And then sixth and seventh, or sorry, and then sorry, fifth and sixth were taken by some of the Asian guilds. Skyline got fifth, JTH sixth, and then Method, kind of the rebuild, got ended up being seventh, which very impressive for them, I would say. But yeah, we have what 7 Denathrius kills
Yeah,
so far with I don't know, did who's up next? I actually haven't checked. Do
I
you know
have no
who's
idea. Like,
progressing
absolutely
right now?
no clue.
I
I don't even know if there's anybody else that's killed generals. I'm sure there's maybe
yeah,
one or two, but it's
I
got to
think
be a short
BDG would be like
list.
yeah, BDG would be the only other guild that makes
Yeah,
sense. But
probably.
oh
Yeah,
yeah,
I.
BDGG and Exorcist are all on them right now.
It
So
is really cool to see Fat Shark Yes get fourth without day rating. That is definitely an
yes,
achievement.
that entire team is just crazy, just so good. It's funny. One of my friends, we were talking about it, and they basically said like FSY is like essentially Method and Echo, or sorry, Limit and Echo's like farm team, right? So like anybody from Fat Shark Yes who wants to start to day raid, just call them up, be like, cool, like let's go, because what like Limit ended up taking what 3 folks, right?
They got, yeah, one
From
of
Fat Shark Yes.
their main tank was from Fat Shark Yes.
Yeah, it's like Scott, I
And
think Impact,
if you
and one
listen
other
to
person.
Max's comments about their new tank post race, he was like super high on him.
Yeah. Yeah, so that team crazy good, crazy good. But I mean, Method seventh, I think, is still a surprise. Like that's a total rebuild. Really, just what Sco being left. So, um, they did well too. Um, so yeah, interesting. We'll hopefully see some more. I'm still pulling for BDG. I think they can get top 10. But they have like Exorcist. I was just checking real quick. They have like Exorcist and Aversion and some other folks sort of also on the boss. So it'll be tough, but
Gotcha.
maybe eighth. So next up, we have a fun story. I thought this was done, but we have another gold stolen through a weak aura, which was
Yeah.
this used to be a big thing. Gosh, when weak auras first got big, this used to be something that would happen fairly regularly. I feel like, but yeah, some streamer, I forget the name, lost about 30,000 gold to a weak aura. Essentially, got some weak aura from a viewer, opened the mailbox, automatically sent 30,000 gold to that player, which is
This, this was
hilarious.
on Classic, by the way. This is
Yeah, on
30,000
classic. Oh yeah.
Classic gold, which
Classic gold,
is
which is huge.
Big
much,
difference.
much, much more valuable than 30,000 gold on retail. That is more like millions and millions of gold on retail.
Yeah,
So,
it's hilarious. Like I think immediately after this, like WeGore's post, they pushed an update to the classic version of the add-on, so this can't happen again. But I mean, this is just one of those things. Like, just don't like watch what sort of WeGores you're downloading. Um, just make sure they're from a trusted source, like you understand, because like you can lose a bunch of stuff.
yeah, I mean,
Fun,
weak auras can do a lot. There are protections against this. Obviously, they are not perfect because this happened again.
right?
Um, but yeah, definitely be careful. Even
Yeah.
if the weak aura is not doing anything malicious, there's just a lot of poorly written ones out there as well that will absolutely lag your computer. You can
Had a
have,
weak aura in Eternal Palace on Ashara that would literally crash my game.
yeah, there you
And
go.
it took me a whole raid night to figure out what it was, but I actually had to sit on a progression night as the tank
Yeah, that's
because I had some weak
scary.
aura that as soon as the ads would come out, game would just crash
Oh my
every
god.
time.
What
That
what
sucks.
do you remember what it was?
I don't. It was honestly I don't.
Okay.
It was one of the regular ones that like the raid got it, but I guess I had a different version or something. I don't know.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, just destroyed my game every time.
Nice, nice. That's like a yeah. I haven't had anything that literally crashed my game, but I did have one on Nizoth that when Paranoia went out. Um, I didn't get there until after Paranoia no longer applied to tanks, but Paranoia went out, and my game would drop to like 2 frames per second, which obviously makes it very difficult to play. Um, and that was fun.
We have one of the raid leader for us likes to troll. So he sent out a week or like probably a couple balls in advance of N'Zoth. And then on N'Zoth, what it does, if he said a specific word, it would de-equip your cloak before the poll. So like we were just in the middle of polls. I think we were having like a rough night, and he triggers it, and like all the mages in our guild like just don't have their cloaks on anymore. We were doing 0 damage. Like it was like the funniest thing. Like I think they fell over, right? Because like you needed like the sanity protection
Yeah,
too.
you get mind controlled if you don't have your
Yeah,
cloak on.
yeah. So it was a fun little thing like of him doing this, and like yeah, it was a fun story. But yeah, Uyghurs can do some funny things. But yeah, this person lost. Hopefully they get the gold back, but they lost what 30,000 gold on classic,
Yeah,
which yeah, not fun, not fun. All right, cool. So next story is around Mythic dungeon tools. Nagi's add-on. So we talked about this a little bit last week. You know, Nagi from Echo has a history of being a little heated as an individual. You know, was taking some flack during the World First race and ended up essentially removing all of his weak ores, public weak ores from Wago, and then basically removing all the mob data from Mythic dungeon tools and putting it behind a paywall.
yeah.
Essentially, you had to be a subscriber or Patreon to get a link to the mob data, which you could still set like add your mobs manually to the add-on, so you could still use the add-on, but
No, you could.
no one's no
No,
one's
no,
doing
you
it. Yeah,
couldn't. You could
you
not use
could.
the add-on in any
Yeah,
reasonable way without the mob data.
yeah,
Um, and you couldn't even like even if you paid for the mob data, you couldn't like share your route with people in your or anything like that. So like even if you paid for it, it still only barely functioned because you couldn't show your group, here's what we're gonna do, unless you like everybody in Discord and did like a Discord stream and pulled up MDT.
yeah. Or I mean, you could of course share the data with everybody and then share the route.
Yes, which is what was happening.
That's
Some
yeah,
people bought the data and then were just sending it around. So
yeah.
he wasn't even actually successfully paywalling it.
Yeah, but in any event, he's removed it. I don't know if I honestly I haven't reinstalled
It
the
is
add-on. I
back.
don't know.
Like if
It is back
you
in there.
updated MDT right now, it will be on the basically the same as it was before, which
Hmm.
I switched back to that one from the other one that forked just because I have a bunch of routes that I had downloaded saved in that and I didn't want to download them all again.
Gotcha.
But
I
yeah,
will say it's a little funky if you've updated it. I kind of had to go through my routes, and there would be just like random like single mobs just deselected in
really.
polls. It's
Huh.
not hard to just like add them back in, but just something to look at if you update it. If you've got routes, I looked at my routes and like, why are they not 100% anymore? And just like random single mobs were
Hmm.
just deselected in polls.
Interesting.
I wonder because
Yeah.
I had when I was complaining earlier about the sanguine depths I did that took longer than planned, um, and we got prideful at a weird time. Like it still added up to 100%, but if I'm thinking about, it, I think it used to be like 105% just to get the prideful on second boss. Wonder if that happened there.
Interesting. Interesting. Yeah. But that's back. So you can reinstall if you uninstalled, I always want to say method dungeon tools, but mythic dungeon tools. The mob data is back. So it's basically the same add-on, except maybe it sounds like some routes deselection of mobs. Um, so cool. So next up is a 14-hour 17 spires. I said run. Sorry. A Korean streamer who does this, I think, fairly regularly.
Yeah,
I remember him back in Legion and BFA, but yeah, spent 14 hours and a plus 17 spires with essentially the world watching. I think when I tuned in, there was something like 4 or 5 thousand people cheering him on. It was great to see.
he
But yeah,
was
they spent.
for a while the number two World of Warcraft stream. I think number one was Asmongold.
Oh
So
wow, crushing it. Um, But they spent 17 hours in a spires, which or sorry, 14 hours in a plus 17 spires. Eventually did complete it. He spent I think the streamer actually left, crafted new legendaries, was buying a bunch of stuff off the auction house. So
Yeah,
it
they
was a
went in with a shaman that was like 190 in this 17 key, and they were stuck on the last boss for most of that 17 hours. And
yeah.
so they literally had the shaman hearth out, upgrade a legendary, buy some BOEs, get more consumables before they actually finally killed it. Yeah, it was wild.
God, it was fun to watch. So weekly no lever. You gotta get it done. You gotta get it done. Um, cool. So yeah, so that was fun. I actually saw him in it was like a 12 or something at like the 8 hour mark the other day too. So if you enjoy watching people wipe a lot, definitely check him out. And then okay, so next up we have Limit released how much gold they spent this tier for them buying another world first. So they spent 331 million, which is seemed like this was a 30% increase
Yeah,
from Nyalotha.
which blows my mind because like in Nilotha they had to do realm transfers and buy corruption BOEs. They would like that was super critical for them to be able to successfully kill it off.
Yeah,
I can't believe that they spent more.
I I
Honestly,
want I wonder because so I wonder if it's because they bought more gear, like they just in general bought more items this time versus like last time they bought specific corruption items with the individual items are more expensive,
maybe
right?
there's also like um with the reduced loot drops, there are things like getting your four. I think there's four BOE slots. Like doing that for every raider is a lot of gold, and also
Right.
very good because you can get 226 BOEs that are basically irreplaceable in the first two lockouts. Like you might get another piece in that slot. Odds are very low, and if you have the BOE, trade that to someone.
Yeah, tradable gear is huge. I've already spent quite a bit of gold on BUEs myself this year.
I am spend some this evening. Going to actually have to look server.
They're good for Brewmaster this tier.
Are
Like
they?
in the
They're crit verse,
past,
aren't
we
they? Or verse?
multiple crit verse.
Yeah,
Yeah, I
yeah,
haven't seen that in a while. So it's like, well, I mean, if it's crit verse and it's 226, there's nothing that's gonna replace that anyway. You might
yeah.
as well
It's gonna be
make
there
it a
forever.
tradable loot
It's
slot.
gonna last
Yeah.
me the entire tier, and uh, one less slot that I have to PvP. Because the PvP gear is also crit verse.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I bought zero gear because I've somehow gotten a ton of luck. Like I got my 220 weapon from Denathrius. I got a bunch of other like heroic. I've gotten mythic pieces off of pretty much every mythic boss we've killed so far. So my loot luck has been pretty good. As a healer, it's great because we always get gear first. You always want to gear up your healers first. It's awesome being able to take weapons from our DPS. So
I feel
nice.
like tanks are technically supposed to get gear last as like, as much as they need to survive and then nothing else. You want to give it to DPS, right?
Yeah,
yeah,
But I've just gotten stupid lucky with gear. Like last tier, this tier,
yeah,
just get all the drops. I don't know what it is.
I got pretty lucky last year, especially if by lucky you mean got Twilight Dove, in which case I was very lucky. This tier, not so much. I actually like I was wearing a heroic dungeon cloak till week before last. I did PvP. It was just like never did a key that someone could trade me a cloak. Never got a drop. Never got one from the raid. It was fine. Finally broke down and did arenas and bought.
nice, nice. So yeah, so Limit spent a lot of gold. But I mean, last time they basically paid it back in like I think 3 resets or something ridiculous in terms of like the
Yeah,
sales they did. So um, yeah, it'd be easy to pay that back. But that's a lot of money. Um, and then so the final next week, and this actually just happened earlier today. So I'll preface this with there are story spoilers coming up. So if you care about the lore, probably should just like turn off your ears. I'll like wave my hands when we're done talking about this section if you're watching live. But basically, we're going to talk about a cinematic that was just released containing Sylvanas, the jailer, and the blonde dude. That's
the blonde dude.
very Varian Wind's kid, Anduin.
Anduin.
Anduin. There we go. Anduin. No, I'm kidding. I knew his name kind of. So
Oh
yeah,
my
so there's a
god.
cinematic with them. It's Anduin of course is trapped inside the twisting halls of Torghast. I think that's where he is. But Sylvanas is there. They crafted a new. So the coolest thing to me was I don't know if you guys noticed, they crafted a weapon that looked very much like the Varian Wind's weapon in terms of like the sword, right? Only it contained a crystal that like the jailer pulled out through like the little portal hole and then gave it to the dude smacking the hammer, making it. Um,
I'm gonna need like we need to do a mini series. It's just Anam explains cutscenes.
That's what happened.
I would
He,
watch that.
he like reached in the little portal thing, and then the dude with the hammer just slammed it in the hole, and then Sylvanas got the sword. Anyway, it was interesting. Unfortunately, so here's my issue with it, and I'll be completely honest: is it sounds like they're gonna do a dumb redemption arc with Sylvanas, and I hate it. Like she's gone off the wagon. She burned she burned Teldrassil, the
Elder
night elf
Cell.
place.
Yes.
Teldrassil, the tree. And then she like killed Sarah Fang, right? In
Yeah.
the fight. Okay, look, I'm good. So like I'm not a fan. Uh so she should just, I mean, she should just be bad. Like at this point, she should just be bad, but there's like this little
She
arc.
easily can't. There's no redeeming. As someone who played Alliance and played a Night Elf for like most of my, albeit short, WoW career, like it's very dear to my heart. Teldrassil, and there's no redeeming her. Like no one is ever gonna forgive her for that.
No.
Yeah.
Like
So, but there was a
no.
tinge. There was like the thought is
They were
there.
laying the groundwork for saying basically that she did that against her will is what it looked like to me, which is like kind of a big retcon. I
Just a
mean,
little bit.
Slightly.
kind of a big
Slightly.
retcon. Like I'm not a fan. Um, we've had plenty of redemption arcs in WoW, some more forced than others, and we could really do without yet another one. Like
Yeah.
sometimes let people like
Just be bad.
just let bad people be bad. Like they
Yeah.
can be villains. It's okay.
Yeah. Um, but yeah, and then I guess the other thing that comes with this cinematic is the fact that Twisting Corridors, which is like the endless version of Torghast, seems to be set to launch this week with this week's reset on January 4th. So new actual content.
Aw, Mount finally within reach.
Yes.
In theory, hope you get corrosive dosage for
Yeah,
your runs.
for the runs.
And rip Mawdark and Slippers. I don't think anyone was really talking about that. I've seen
The
like
jumping one.
in Peak of Serenity, it's everyone's like, oh, corrosive dosage. But man, I used to get Mawdark and Slippers and just blow through,
That
and can't do that anymore.
that one is the one that I think Tokane posted a video on Reddit where he just like jumped in a quarter and did a billion damage to the boss and killed
It
it.
was insane. It was so much more than corrosive, and
Um,
yeah, they
but you could only get that if you
Blizzard
were
said no
Kyrian.
more.
So
Oh,
I could
true,
not
yeah.
get it.
Of course you're
Feels bad.
Kieran though, right?
I've been
Kieran's the
tempted to
only
swap.
Kieran's like the only covenant that matters.
If you haven't swapped this week just from Necrotic, like what are you doing?
Not Myth Plus.
Touche. Touche.
um, yeah, I don't know. I heard it was beguiling week again, and I was really not into that. Although I have done a
It's
couple of
actually
keys, and it's
not
not as
that.
bad.
It's
It's
not that bad. I think there's more ways to deal with it than beguiling for sure.
yeah, and the fact that it doesn't add a mob to existing polls, I think, is actually a sneaky like big deal. It
Yeah.
in some of them, I was surprised that they put it on a little mob in a pack, and yeah,
Yeah. Or like some of them it'll be on the only caster mob in the pack, and it's like,
yeah,
well, you can interrupt that one, so it's fine.
yeah.
So it has made Necrotic a little interesting because you can't ring or stun
Yeah,
or kite until
I did
the
it.
mob dies.
The key that I did on my paladin today, I totally forgot it was necrotic and pulled the first two packs in Sanguine Depths together with I had not run Bop because I was planning on using spell warding for the second boss, and promptly died with 50 stacks because you could not slow them.
Nice.
It
Nice.
was not good.
Speakerian.
Yeah, my paladin's Venthyr because Ashen Hollow is big damage.
It is big damage.
Yeah. But yeah, so that's what happened this week. So
That's it.
the main topic of our show today, now that we're reaching 30 minutes into it, is going to be talking about Mythic Raid, both like kind of two pieces that are tied together, how we prepare for Mythic bosses, and also kind of what our thoughts are on some of the bosses we have done so far this tier. And so real quick, let's go around and mention what our current progression is. Kiev already said they're working on Council, which would be the last boss that you're doing right before Sludgefist.
Yeah, it'll be 7 for us.
Yeah. So I think by far most progressed in the room right now. In the room. So Anam, how about you?
So we just did Sun King, so we are starting Zymok progression. So we did Sun King before Zymok this time. So
And
we got the portal boss.
I'm back here bringing up the rear with a mere 3 of 10 so far. Due to holiday stuff, our raid is rescheduled to tomorrow and Monday, so I haven't raided yet this week. But we are through Hungering Destroyer. We're doing Zymox next, and then we're probably doing Sun King after that. So
That's the order that we did too.
Yeah, I
yeah,
don't know
it's
why we did Sun King first, but
so we were actually talking in officer chat today, and it looks like a lot of guilds are starting to switch over to doing Sun King first now that people have started figuring out, what's the comp, like how many healers you should bring, what do you do, add spawns, like especially guilds doing the thing where you just don't kill high whatever his name is Darathos at the start. So you don't get vanquishers immediately. That helps push, phase 1 a lot faster. So
yeah,
there are some things now that people are doing Sun King first. I think it's pretty reasonable. Which is
remember
actually kind of cool that there are multiple different bosses you could do right now.
Yeah, because I mean, Sun King's really easy. I guess now with gear, it's probably going to even get easier because as long as you can push the healing, like
Mm.
if you do the first phase before the first spawns, like it's 45 seconds, it's easy. And then the second phase, you can heal before the second shield, so you don't actually get what are the little ads that run in?
The
The
infusers.
infusers.
Yeah, you can skip the infusers in the second healing phase. So if you can do that, the fight's easy because like the shade does uh zero healing. So or sorry, 0 damage. So there's no healing. Um, but so I think that's our progression. I guess Kia being the most progressed. How have you been enjoying the fights so far? Any standouts? Exciting?
Yeah, I think overall pretty good tier. It's no it's no Nighthold, it's no like amazing raid or whatever, but I think after some of the raid's last expansion, this is like a welcome, change. I like most of the bosses. Um, Honestly, Huntsman was such a good fight to me, and it's kind of a shame that it was like the second boss of the tier, and we killed it the first night that Mythic was open, and it's like, all right, well that's over with. I wish that I think it's really well designed, and I wish that we had something like that, like a little later, that I could have progressed on a little more. But I mean, as a brewmaster, like Huntsman felt great. It felt very much like my life was in my own hands, and that's what every tank always wants, right? Like,
Yeah.
if you press your buttons well, if you play well, then you do well, and if you don't, then you die. Like that's the best feeling. Um, some of the bosses are lacking that.
I've heard about Dark Vein.
That's definitely one of them, especially
Yeah.
as a brewmaster. My God, it's terrifying. It is a really scary boss for tanks at if you're doing it now at like the current gear level.
Not looking.
And it just feels like there's no counterplay. It's not like there's like a tank buster or some specific ability that you get through that and then you're fine. It's like you're never fine. You're always at risk of dying as a brewmaster. Just every second of the fight, I feel like I can just fall over, and there's not enough like cooldowns or mitigation to cover all of those gaps.
Yeah. So, yeah. How about you, Anam? I mean, you mentioned you hated Sun King.
Well, no, I love Sun King. I actually enjoy that fight because as a Mistweaver, number one, and as just a healer in general, it's really nice that all I have to do is focus one player for the 4.5 minutes the fight player. So one mob, the 4.5 minutes the fight lasts, and that's it. Because like I literally waste all my mana to heal him. Then we go in this intermission phase where we have to move around and like shamans drop spirit link. Other healers do cooldowns that I don't do anything with. I just let my mana regen and then I do it another time. And then we win. It's literally like I think when we killed it, we pushed to the second shade phase, I think 3 times. On the third time we killed it. The first time we pushed randomly and didn't realize what we were doing. A bunch of ads we didn't know how to kill. The second time we were a little bit more prepared. I think we screwed up something, and then the third time we killed it. So, and Sun King's fun. I mean, I would say that in terms of progression wise, I agree. Huntsman, beautiful boss. Like for whatever reason, even as a healer, it's a lot of fun because like there is healing actual raid members, but there are ads you have to worry about in terms of healing, which some people don't enjoy. But it was interesting to build strategies around, particularly the little ads. So like after you get the second dog, anybody that gets hit by Sin Seeker spawns a little ad that will slowly walk towards the boss. If it gets there, the boss gets a damage increase. So there's like a interesting way of like saying like, all right, one healer get the close ads as the people who are doing the immune soaking. If you did that strat, and then like other healers will get the far ads, sort of another thing to manage, which is fun. So yeah, Huntsman was cool. Hunger and Destroy is a terrible boss. Literally should be removed from the game. Like any fight. So here's my thing: any fight where there is an immunity, where you as a healer cannot heal a person that is dying, is so frustrating. Particularly as a Mistweaver, because most of the time our healing is not very targeted. So like Essence Font or Renewing Mist will jump to
Oh
those players
no.
and just be immune. And like there's nothing you can do. It's like a waste. So
Oh man, I
yeah,
hadn't even thought about that.
it's dumb.
That's so
And then
bad.
and as soon as
Smart heals, by the way.
yeah,
Smart
smart, smart,
heals.
yes. And the other great thing is that on any time you have an immunity fight like this, shamans become automatically one of the best healers in the game, along with any level of dis that has an absorb. So like at that point, you as any healer that does actual direct healing sort of falls off, which
Yeah.
kind of sucks. So I'm gonna sure is a
Our
terrible boss.
what we have so we have Resto Shamans. Turns out extremely good.
Perfect.
And a Disc
Absolutely
Priest.
perfect. Absolutely perfect.
And we have our Resto Druid has a Disc Priest ult. So we might actually run the most disgustingly meta comp of double Disc Priest, double Resto Shaman, and then have a Holy Paladin in there somewhere.
Nice.
And just like be the meta. It'll make up for our tank comp. Actually, I guess our tank comp is meta now because it's Brewmaster Vengeance.
Is that meta? Because Brewmaster feels pretty.
Brewmaster feels really bad. It feels really bad. I want to play Paladin instead, but I'm our physical. So
yeah, there's no other monks in my whole guild, which I kind of like because obviously Brewmaster is like my comfort pick. I have all the other tanks.
I wouldn't say I'm very comfortable on this tier though.
I can theoretically play any of the other tanks, and they asked me to gear up my Prot Warrior and to have that ready to go. But obviously, I've been playing Brewmaster by far the longest of any of the tanks, and I have the best reactions, the best instincts, and it's kind of my comfort pick. So I'm not mad about there not being any other monk in the raid. It keeps me on my Brewmaster, but man, then you get fights like Darkfane, and it's like, but can I play a Demon Hunter? Council feels really good. I will say Council is all physical damage on the tank, and Brewmaster it feels really good.
Yeah, I mean that's it pops up in keys as well. That's part of why I've been really frustrated in keys because there's just like random garbage. Like Plaguefall is really bad about this, where there's a bunch of dots and things that go out that just you look at your damage breakdown after pulling, you're like, I took % magic damage easily.
Corroded Claws, by the way, hits me
almost got one shot.
On a 16, hit me for 95% of my health from the application.
Yeah,
that's with an instant dispel. So
it's very scary. I don't know what they were doing with some of the tuning on those builds, but very scary, and I would expect to see some of them toned down sometime. But we're getting off topic.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Awesome.
I will say I definitely did not like Hungering Destroyer, but I will echo both of your statements that Huntsman was fun. Huntsman has like a lot of bosses over the past expansion have suffered from having almost literally nothing for the tanks to do.
Mm-hmm.
This one did not have that problem. I feel slightly
Yeah.
bad for my co-tank because he was stuck tanking the boss the entire time, basically. He was just on Altamore. Um, but I got to do Barghast, doing the Rip Soul thing, and slightly disappointed that you can't basically immune it off every time with Celestial Brew, but it was
But you
you
pretty
you
much can.
you get close. You get close. Um, and then Acutus is probably like one of my favorite parts of the fight because of like just trying to make that judgment call of okay, can I just plant for the rest of the fight and just not move
Yeah.
and just tank him for the rest of the fight?
The answer is
And
usually no.
yeah, it's really dangerous to do that. It's fun when you're like, yeah, I can chain my Fort Brute into my Dampen Harm and tank this for the next 25 seconds without dying. And if it dies
Hakutus,
even 1 second late, I will die.
Hakutus is fun because it's like I'm fine, I'm fine, I'm fine, and then all very suddenly I am not fine. Like
Yeah,
it is that gap, like that 5 to 6 stacks is right where you go from like I am hard
very not
chilling on this
okay.
to oh okay, we're not okay.
Yeah, yeah,
And it's a really interesting judgment call, like feeling like you're fine and then it's like oh I just got one shot, okay, well
yeah. But at the same time, that one is physical damage. It's auto attacks. So like my buttons work, which is really the most important thing, as opposed to something like Dark Vein or Corrosive Claws. Buttons don't do anything.
yeah, we like. I mean, it's Huntsman is really fun. I think as a brewmaster, it's like everything that brewmaster wants. It's a lot of physical damage with like single large magic hits that can be mitigated by a celestial brew. It's like
Yeah,
the perfect, well-rounded combination of abilities that we can handle completely, like with our toolkit. So, I mean, that feels really good. I think it's a great fight for brewmaster.
yeah. Pity it's the second boss and not the last one. I have no idea how good the last boss is for Master because, to be 100% honest, I have not started prepping for Mythic Denathrius yet. Because
I
it's still a
haven't either.
very long way off. Well, it's farther off for me than it is for you, at least. Um,
All
but
I know is heroic Denathrius still hurts me, and I'm 220 equipped.
yeah, it still hurts me too. I talked a little bit last week about how I threw like real hard by not having prepared enough for heroic Denathrius. Like I'm gonna be over prepared for every boss for the remainder of the tier as a result of that. But um, yeah, that I felt really bad by just that boss slaps and also has pretty hard positioning requirements. Like not hard as in difficult to execute, hard as in you wipe if you don't in phase 3.
I think Denathrius is a really, really good example of a boss that tanks. It shows you like what goes into tank preparation and what goes into like good tank preparation. Whereas you can go into phase 3 of Denathrius and you can know every ability, what everything does, and feel like you're ready for it. But if you don't know the timings and the positionings and like that extra layer of
It's
stuff, you
just
go in
like,
and
and
you
that was me. Yeah,
that was me too. Yeah. I was not super ready for Denathrius either. Again, one of those things where you're like, I've got it. I know what everything does. And then get in there like, you don't got it.
no,
And
you
that's
don't.
part of
It's,
part of that tank preparation, if you're really wanting to do a good job, is knowing the timings of things, having watched videos, seeing the positioning, knowing what's going to be coming up and where you need to be,
yeah,
instead of kind of feeling like you're always chasing after, like caught behind.
yep. Uh, yeah. So man, like So Kiev, you're 7 bosses in. I am curious, at what point this, well, I guess just at what point did you start doing boss prep?
So I started technically on beta. We did like our whole raid had a mandatory raid testing. It's nice when they open it up like on the weekends because we normally raid on
Yeah,
Sunday nights. So we actually had on a raid night at raid time, we went in and tested some bosses. And then obviously the ones during the day are optional. I didn't really get to do a lot of those because I work during the day.
right.
But it's really interesting because I went into this tier like I'm going to be super prepared. I'm going to be way more prepared than I was in Nihilotha. Um, like really in depth was looking at stuff on beta, and then we got to live and like so much changed
Yeah,
from beta to live.
I got blindsided by I got blindsided by this on heroic, not mythic, thankfully, but on huntsman. Um, for the entirety of beta, if you fully absorbed Rip Soul, it would not spawn an ad. That changed on live, and I
Yeah.
definitely wiped us because I was keeping them stacked. But the soul was spawning and giving the boss like double damage or triple damage or whatever it was.
So I actually knew about that one. I walked into Mythic Shriekwing not knowing, or I think it was heroic. Like on the day that the raid came out, not knowing that
You didn't
the
have to stand in the.
LOS mechanic behind the pillar doesn't drop the blood under you anymore.
Oh yeah,
So like I was fully prepared. I had like my beta strats positioning, up against the wall where you were going around the corner. Like people were doing that on beta because you would drop the whole raid would drop pools,
yeah,
and they're like it doesn't do that anymore.
yeah. Which
Uh,
thankfully
didn't know that.
there's enough people getting hit by random mechanics that drop blood pools that like if that
That one was a
also dropped
little
blood pools,
unnecessary.
you would run out of this like limit wouldn't run out of space. No
Yeah.
shame. We would run out of space.
But yeah, just some things like that. I felt like really good because I was writing the peak raid guides, and I was like, this is gonna be so good for my raid prep. Like if I'm writing the guides, like I'm gonna know what's going on.
And had to go
Like
and rewrite a bunch
wrote
of
a
them.
bunch of them on beta, and then had to go through. Like I'm still going through and just rewriting stuff
Yeah.
because so much change. So
Yeah. Yep. So,
It's funny.
oh, sorry,
Oh,
go ahead.
one thing on that is just like when you end up writing guides, at least for me, I don't know if you end up doing this, but like I overwrite certain things that I think are important and underwrite other ones that might not be as important. And like people, I don't know if you get this feedback, but I always get questions about like, why didn't you write about this ability? I'm like, well, it doesn't matter. But sure, I can mention it. Like, or it's like when you get to live or something, it's like actually a bigger deal, right? Because similarly, like I didn't do much like during the day of like the mythic or heroic raid testing, right? Like the end of day stuff, at least here on the East Coast. So I didn't do a lot of like on beta. So a lot of what I found out was on live itself, running the actual raid on heroic like the first couple days. And yeah, it was fun going back like rereading and rewriting some of that stuff because I'm like things that should have been important are not important anymore, and things that I just totally didn't even write in. Now I need to like write larger sections on. So um,
it's really interesting to me to see like how my perspective changes as I go through the fight. So when I first start like making my notes or writing stuff for the guides like during progression on the fight, I have a very detailed like here's how I'm handling this, here's where I'm going, whatever. And then when I actually get to the end of the fight, like once we've killed it, a good example is like on Artificer for the glyph positionings, like where we were bringing them out to. I had every single glyph listed out. This is the mark you bring it to. This is where you go. This is the plan, whatever. And then we get to like the end of progression. We killed the boss, and I was like, I mean, you basically just run them all out to the same place. Like,
yeah, yeah,
I was looking at some kill logs to prepare for Arzymox progression, and yeah, there's like one that is in a bad overlap that you might do differently.
I tend to have, yeah, I tend to have like my really detailed sticky notes when we first start Prog, and then we get to the end of the fight, and I'm just like, it's not actually that complicated.
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, I do something similar in terms of like healing where I look at like very early on I don't care about my mana, but then as we get further into the fight and like we're towards like the end of progression, like the final phase or whatever, like I'll start to care much more about it, like phase 1 and 2. and I find myself actually doing worse because I'm like, all right, I can't heal here. I can heal here. Like, when can I push? When can I not? And at the end of the day, it's like, well, if I just did everything the way I have been doing, I'd be fine anyway. Like, I end the fight. Some like kills we've done, I've ended the fight with like 20-30% mana, which is like ridiculous in terms of progression kill sometimes. So um like the Sun King fight we just did, I was very conservative in like our second like healing push because I was worried about the final phase and healing that. I ended up ending the fight, I think, at 40% mana. Like,
Oh my
because
gosh.
there's no healing at the end, and it's like, well, I could have pumped more, during that sort of second healing phase. So yeah, I
I
mean,
mean,
it's
that makes me feel better about playing my paladin on that because if
yeah.
there's no healing in the second phase, that means all 5 healers can heal me, right?
I mean, like, to be fair, like the intermission phase on that fight are just all cooldowns. Like the biggest damage is like the fire soak thing, right?
Yeah.
And like that's basically it. And if you have you already have two shamans, so you have at least two spirit links. And if you have a disc, you have a barrier, you're basically done. I don't think you should get more than, I think there's what, four soaks generally now. So
And the last one, you just
um
have them die. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So but yeah, I mean that's yeah. It's funny how much, yeah, it's similar Kiev in terms of like very hyper focus. Like as you start, and then like at a certain point it's just like muscle memory, just like, well, looking back, like I really didn't have to micromanage exactly hitting my cooldown right here, so it was up like
Yeah.
3 minutes later because there was enough like wiggle room, it wasn't that big a deal. So yeah, yeah, it's funny. um yeah, so it sounds like we've talked a little bit about this, but so it sounds like a lot of us start sort of in the almost in the beta timeline, right, in terms of like
Yeah.
getting ready, preparing for bosses.
I
um
would have loved to actually get beta to
oh well, yeah, that's right. Oh,
do
we still have to bring this
testing.
up, don't we? I almost
Yeah.
testing was great over
Ian,
there,
if
man.
you're
We learned so
listening,
much.
beta next time, please. Thanks.
um, but as a guild, I mean, I will say that my guild did not do anything like built or like not built, but like planned on beta together as a group, right? But we do build like Discord channels. So like in our Discord, we have a
Mhm.
channel essentially for every boss. um in turn, and we drop in there at the start, it's very like anybody can post, so you just sort of dump a bunch of information in there, and then like once we hit live, we essentially like make them read only, and they're only for like basically officers to sort of post like, here's our strategy, right, here's
That's
what we're
not a
gonna
bad
do,
idea. I have
comp.
I have our channels pulled up right now. We
Yeah,
do boss channels as well. Uh, ignore stuff. Um, but where all of our stuff, some details about the boss, positioning diagrams, videos that we're gonna need, ship posting because we don't lock our channels. It's all in there.
yeah, yeah, yeah. We end up locking ours in terms
Locking them's a
of,
good idea.
yeah. And then we have like a general strategy channel that like that anybody can post in. And normally like if we're working on a boss, it's mostly posts about that boss. So that way you have like the history of what you talked about doing, and then like right up front you have like, all right, here's what we're actually gonna do to kill the boss. So um but that's it sounds like, yeah, that's what we do. It sounds like what you do. I don't know, Kiev, if you guys do something similar in my.
We're kind of old school. We we have a website with forums, and
Oh, nice.
everything is on the forums. It was really weird. It caught me off guard when I first joined the guild because I was like, "You guys actually use the forums?" Like a lot of guilds
Yeah.
will, a
We'll
lot of guilds
have
will
them,
have
but not
them,
use
but
them.
they like no one has been on them in years. Like they're super active on the forums. We have a thread every week that'll have a comp for each of the bosses. It'll have any specific assignments like interrupts or anything like that. And then we have a like general strategy thread that has all of our pictures and strats and assignments and everything for all of the bosses for progression. So everything
Nice.
gets documented on there.
Yeah. I mean, one thing about forums that I say is an improvement over Discord is it's a lot harder to shitpost.
Yeah. So our main strategy thread is locked off, so where people can't um, post in there if they're not an officer. So it's literally just the strategy, the pictures, the assignments, all of that.
Yeah.
And then we'll have like an actual thread for discussion. And it's usually more of, well, we'll have one, we have the general strategy and it'll have all the stuff for all the bosses for like Prog. And then we've got a thread for each boss where once we start Prog on it, it'll be like more of a discussion. Like we'll have a raid night and then people will go in and be like, hey, we can do this differently. Or officers will put stuff in there with, here's what we noticed, here's what we need to improve on, from last raid night to next raid night, stuff like that.
Yeah,
Nice.
I use Google Docs. I have uh lots of Google Docs. It's like, here's everything that went wrong last raid night. Here's what we're gonna do and try and fix it. Sometimes it's a little overzealous. Sometimes we try and change too.
Yeah. One thing we started with this tier, because my guild we ended up so I generally a 2 night a week guild, but the first week of Mythic we actually ended up raiding 4 nights, just the first week. And what we ended up doing was in the actual like ERT notes we had, like on a boss we were progressing, we had like a goal at the beginning of the week. This is where we wanted to hit, and then each night it was like, all right, on this night we expect to like kill this boss, or like our first night on Sun King, we had like a bunch of people out because of the holiday. So like it literally our goal was like get to phase two, get to second healing phase. And like that's all we focused on doing. So that sort of helped us, I think, in terms of like actually in the game approaching a boss and being like, all right, this is our goal for the night. And that way we can sort of look back, right? Like, why didn't we get there? What were we missing? I mean, Sun King was like, we were missing our main healing priest. We had some scuffed alt out there, and like a bunch of other stuff was like wrong. So
Yeah,
that's sort of something new we sort of implemented now is sort of in raid day goals, which I think is helpful.
yeah, I think that's good.
Yeah, particularly for like I think longer tier bosses, like end of tier, like when you
Yeah,
start, I guess in this tier, it'd be like when you get to generals or Denathrius, right? It's like rather than like just like, hey, we're gonna kill the boss. It's like, all right, for like the first night, you want to be here, get to this time and get to this point, right? Which I think helps morale too, in terms of like a
yeah.
guild being like,
Set
because N'Zoth
reasonable
was rough,
expectations.
dude. Like just looking back on our N'Zoth progression, it was like there were certain nights where I'm like, I just don't even want to be here. Like, like by hour one, I'm just like, there's 3 more hours here. Like, we're not gonna kill this. Oh, we're not gonna kill this tonight. I just knocked everything off my desk. We're gonna kill this tonight, and like it's just not fun. So like having something like that would have been nice to be like, all right, we just want to get through like this phase or this part, and then like, hey, it's a successful night. So, um, but yeah, it sounds like a little bit of everything, like Discord channels, like forums, things like that. I don't know if you guys use like spreadsheets. So I know like for
Mhm.
healers, like for me, we end up doing like healing cooldown spreadsheets. So like just so that we know as we go into a boss, like here's when we're using certain cooldowns at what timings. I try and tie them to like abilities. That way we know like right if there's like a consume on hungering, it's of course spirit link because why not? But like if there's another cooldown we needed, right? So that's something else we do in our guild is we'll have like a spreadsheet that just has all our cooldown timings boss by boss, and we sort of adjust it. So we'll have like first kill, and then like if we have to change anything, it's easier to be like, all right, you take X person's cooldown, and like so the timings always stay the same. It's just like the players might interchange. So
Yeah, we have a spreadsheet for that basically with assignments on it that you can check that won't get lost in Discord.
gotcha.
Um, and our healing officer has their own thing that they do. They have their own like healers only channel that I'm allowed into. I'm a tank, and that counts, I guess. Um, and
We have the same thing.
Nice.
so he will post healing assignments for every boss there, and then of course ERT notes for primarily. But
Gotcha. Funnily enough, we never use ERT notes for healing cooldowns generally.
really,
Like it's normally, yeah, like depending on the fight, like it's normally we talk about it and people just use it, or like somebody will be responsible for like calling it out, like, hey, you have next revival, or you have like shout or like AM like for the next ability. Um, we just found that worked easier. It came actually from our Rastakhan progression because like the third phase there, like our cooldowns, we couldn't get it right. So like I literally just spent the time of like looking at ERT and be like, all right, what's coming up next? What cooldown do we have available? And like calling it. So
yeah.
it's sort of like stuck in terms of like just calling it makes it simpler. So yeah. Plus I shove my ERT note like in the corner and like I never look at it because it's never important for
I have mine turned
healers.
off because it's just healer cooldowns, and I
Yeah.
don't have any.
Yeah.
Ours
I
are
like
usually just interrupts or any, specific assignments. But
with
all of our stuff goes on our forums, so all of our healer cooldowns, assignments, everything like that is on the forums posted. Before we ever get to a boss. Our officers are amazing. Like I cannot speak highly enough of Might's officers because they'll go through and they'll find a log of a guild that like just recently killed it, like just before us. So they'll find something that has like similar DPS to us, similar timings, and they will assign all of the healer cooldowns, all of the not all of the DPS cooldowns, but if there's something specific that we need certain DPS cooldowns, they'll assign all of that, assign all the interrupts before we ever pull the boss. Like it'll all be there, it'll all be ready for everyone.
Yeah, so we do something similar where we won't assign it, but like I will go through. I literally because we kill it late enough that there's enough public logs that like normally someone has our healing comp. So I'll do very similar. It's like I won't match it up with DPS, but I'll match it up at least with healing comp and see like when their healers use certain cooldowns. Essentially, just build our template based on that, and then like we adjust in like as we fight, as we go through the boss. But like yeah, we do I do something very similar for my guild in terms of just like making sure we're prepped there. So
Yeah,
yeah.
I do.
It must it's so much harder though at US 30 though, like at that level there's not many public logs, I feel like. I guess there's still a
We
ton.
usually have a specific guild that we follow pretty much their strat, their logs for almost every boss, if
Nice.
not every boss.
Nice. I like that. I like that. I
Nice.
need to find that guild. I need to find a sister guild to like
Well, they've got they you know, officers know each other and
yeah.
they share information, and they're almost always killing stuff right before us. So we'll get, you know, a lot of our strats and timings and logs and stuff from that guild.
Oh,
My
very cool.
my raid team has, or my guild has two raid teams. One of them raids weekdays, the other one's mine, raids on the weekend. And historically the weekend team's been like way, but last year a week or two behind. This year about the same. So I've definitely made use of like, okay, you go look at the midweek teams logs and see what I can see. And like they have the same tank comp. They have a different healing comp, but the DPS is at least in the same ballpark. So I can look at that, and it's a great source looking at positioning things and makes my life easier because that's the main thing that I am interested in at this point is like looking at tank positioning, figuring out what works, what doesn't, and what kill us.
Yeah. Well, cool. Man, forums. That's like God.
I miss forums, you know?
It's fine. So a little bit of a side, but my guild actually I think just got rid of our forums because the last remaining thing was guild apps, right? And
Mhm.
so we now have everything built into Discord with like a Discord bot that like you submit an app, it adds you to our Discord server, creates a little channel just for your app, and then like you fill out something and like it posts it in the channel, and then like just that person and like the guild can interact with them
Yeah,
all in Discord. It's crazy.
That's
we
I don't think
pretty
have
we have.
cool.
we
I don't
have
think we have
a
forums anymore.
we have a Discord bot that you fill out a Google form, and it creates a channel for you with your app in it, and adds you to it, and adds all of our raiders to it. So we can do that same thing. It doesn't invite them to the Discord server. I should add that because they need to be in
Yeah.
the Discord server, or else one of us has to manually add them. I mean, I miss
We have
forums.
a website submission, and then it's the forums. I will
Nice.
say it's super weird to me when I joined, but it is so much easier to go back and find things on the forums
Oh
than
yeah.
in Discord. Like stuff doesn't get lost, and it's all segmented. So you know, if we're having a discussion on a boss, it's in that boss's thread,
Yeah.
and it doesn't just get lost in a big. I mean, I guess you have the same thing if you've got boss channels in
Well,
Discord.
you kind of do, but what happens a lot is that people just like start talking about it somewhere else. Like,
Mhm.
well, we have our like lounge channels, and that people just happen to mention it, and then there will be a discussion that starts, and then 3/4 of that discussion will happen in that channel and get lost forever. And
Uh-huh.
the remaining like 1/4, somebody will go, "Oh, we should move this to the boss channel."
It doesn't happen on forums.
That does
Yeah.
not happen.
People don't casually have
People don't
discussions in
casually
Discord.
talk on guild forums.
No, yeah, well, it mostly happens in Discord, and then the forums are super clean. It's really easy to find stuff. Um, so I'm not opposed to that. You know,
Yeah.
it's easy to put the forums up on my second monitor and have like the picture of positioning and the assignments and stuff just like on my monitor. They're there, you know, while we're rating.
Yeah. Awesome. Awesome. I think the only sort of topic I had here just around like prep work was just like common strategy things, right? So like there's a lot of things that sort of fights have in common. Like tank swaps, I think are a big one, right?
Yeah.
But just also like in general, like some cooldowns I think are also sort of very similar in terms of like from a healer point of view, it's like big damage requires X cooldown, right? So there's something like that. So I don't know if there's any sort of common things. I mean, this is probably more appropriate to tanks, but like if there is a tank swap mechanic, is it a very simple like you have the weak aura that I don't know if people tanks do this. I did this when I tanked because I'm terrible, but I had like a weak aura that like put over my head how many stacks I had, and then it yelled at me when I was supposed to taunt.
Yeah,
My co-tank sub.
I,
So I don't know
I
if
have
that's a
a weak aura that I do every tier as part of my prep, like making it as part of how I do, where I just go through and I pull out all of the different debuffs and buffs that I need to care about to do taunt swaps. Put
mhm,
that all in the big weak aura, or well, it's a lot of small weak auras inside it, and use that. And I mean, by and large, it's basically taunt when your stacks drop. There's a couple of exceptions to that rule, but
mhm,
it's basically how it goes for 90% of bosses. So a lot of what I actually spend time preparing is looking at positioning. Like we talked a little bit about Denathrius earlier. Denathrius is one where I did not spend enough time preparing for the positioning requirements of the last phase, and it cost us a couple hours of raid time, which I am very much not happy about. Um, I don't like being in that position where I'm the one that's costing a lot of time. But yeah, so positioning is definitely the biggest one, and that is probably one of the hardest things to do prep for by looking at this, because you oftentimes just don't have context for like what's going on in the fight. Like you try and look at the replay, and it's you can see where they stand, but you can't see why. Things like pools on the ground, um, well, mostly actually pools on the ground that dictate where you can stand on a lot of fights just don't show up in Warcraft logs. So you like, why are they standing there? It could be because it's the only place they can stand safely, or it could be because it's part of their strategy, and you don't know.
It sounds so obvious, but like the best thing that you can do as a tank is watch a video of a tank doing the fight. Because a lot of guilds will link, here's the strat that we're going to follow, here is a video, and it'll be of like a range DPS point of view.
Yeah, looking at a
Find a
warlock's
tank,
POV is useless to me.
like find a tank doing the fight, watch what they're doing, watch positioning, watch when they're taunting, stuff like in council, like we swap on 2 stacks for the most part, but at the start of the fight, Squish takes 3, and we do that twice because he takes 3 stacks and then we'll phase for the dance, and then we just don't even have to swap in the beginning. And it's just little things like that where like you can know the mechanic and like know what you're doing, but until you actually go and watch a mythic point of view of your role, your class, or like look at logs and look at what are they taunting on? Is there any time that they're not just taunting on 2 stacks, and why? Is there some overlap? Is there something that's causing
Yeah,
this?
especially if you can find one that has comms on. Um, that's super useful because you can hear them. You can hear. Oh, let me keep this for another stack because whatever, like because I have Kyrian Pot or because I have a defensive, because I'm padding with Angry Dave, whatever the case may be. I definitely have never done that last one. But
I'm sure you haven't. I'm sure.
definitely not.
Well, just I mean, it depends too on like your comp and the classes that you're playing and how they handle certain fights can change that so much. Like especially in the past, like in Nyalotha, Squish would play whatever tank we needed for utility. So like he would play a paladin on N'Zoth because it brings an extra immunity, and it wouldn't always be the strongest. And Brewmaster was really strong in Nyalotha, so like I would tank stuff all the time. Like whenever I could, I
Yeah.
would leave it on me. I could take that extra stack, whatever, to like make his job easier, especially with him being the raid leader. It's a little different now because Brew's not quite there,
Mm-hmm.
but Council is one of those good ones where I can leave it on me for an extra stack. I got this, whatever. If he's if he's taking a lot of damage or if he's raid leading, if there's something really stressful going on and he's calling it out and he's really focused on that, I'm like, don't even worry about it, like leave it on me. Whereas Enerva, I'm dying all the time,
Mhm.
and he'll take things for an extra stack, or he'll leave the ad on him the whole time, and it's just kind of, we feel it out. It's not like necessarily something we do consistently every time, but he'll see that I'm starting to die, and he'll just like leave it on me. It's fine.
Yeah. My co-tank right now is playing Vengeance, and I think they were using like Fiery Brand Lego for our Hungering Destroyer kill. I was talking about how I had heard from that it hurt, and from logs it looked like it hurt, and so he was playing the defensive legendary, and so we kind of felt it out, and he ended up taking the boss every single time the expunge goes out because he's just so much more stable during that. I'd
Yeah.
have to like blow Healthstone and a major cooldown in order to live through that. Or
Brewmaster is so bad for boss tank for expunge, because it just, I
yeah,
mean, stagger, like it just keeps
it just keeps going.
getting bigger. Yeah, no, we had every time, even if I would be bad and like taunt to reset stacks right as it was going out, like he would taunt back. He knew like he was gonna take that every time.
Yeah, and I need to get better. So this is the first year I've tanked with my current coach. The DPS player for us last year, and swapped to tank, and I need to get better at. I don't know. I don't quite trust that. Not that he doesn't know what he's doing, because that's not it at all. But just
Sure.
that he's going to actually tell me to taunt when he needs help. Like, I don't have
Instead of
that.
just staying quiet and dying. Yeah.
Yeah, or being like, oh yeah, I can take that. That's fine. Meanwhile, I don't know if he's actually fine or if it's going through like an A, B, C, D, and like he's got nothing left for when he actually needs it later.
Communication is so important, especially on Prog, and that's
Yeah, I
like
just
one of
don't
the
have
biggest.
that like
It's one of the
with him
biggest
yet.
differences that I've seen, like going from, because I jumped ranks pretty considerably, like my past couple guilds. You know, from starting in Legion in a normal guild to now, uh, just every step of the way, like seeing all the differences between the, you know, different ranked guilds. One of the really big things for us is just communication, even just stuff like saying that you're taunting. If there's a lot going on, like just little calls, quick, concise calls to communicate. And it's something that I'm still like, I still
Yeah,
have to be better at it all the time. And
yeah, and I mean it's something that past couple of people I tanked with, I ended up doing a lot of like not raid leading, but being very much in charge of what was going on with tanking and kind of microing. I don't know that, but again, getting off topic again.
No, I actually, it's kind of a good little segue into like the next section. So we talked a little bit about how we like approach setting up for bosses, right? Like before the first pull, all the different resources we pull in, like how we set up our guilds or how we set up the teams, right? That we're ready to go. But then as we get into starting a boss, I think, Kiev, you mentioned this a little bit, right? As you start to pull the boss, like that's really where you start to see, all right, does what we prepped for really make sense? Like, does it work, right? Is there a timing we're not aware of? Is there, it's better that we don't sort of follow this like in a robotic sense all the way through, that we make some adjustments. So I mean, I think the biggest thing here is like when you, after your first couple pulls, like what are some of the things you look at and make adjustments to, like what almost immediately, right? Is it sort of a um like a, I don't know, I guess, is it, how do you make those adjustments? Like, hey, we see something on logs almost immediately. Are you the type of person or the guild that sort of reviews logs in and between pulls? Or is it more of a like, hey, this just isn't working in terms of like what we're seeing during the fight, we'll make a small change here and there?
my big ones are like right away, the very first things that I'm starting to look at is what in my UI is not working for me. Like what weak aura do I need to get? What am I not paying enough attention to? What do I need to go into bigwigs and emphasize? What do I need to deselect in bigwigs because
Mhm.
I don't need it and it's a distraction? Like and that's where you kind of talked about, you go through and you make a weak aura for those taunt swaps for every single boss from the start. I used to do that. Now I'm kind of in the camp of like, I'll feel it out
Mhm.
and I'll see how distracted I am by other things and I'll see what it feels like. And if I need to do something, I will. So in Nerva, I went and I just made a weak aura that gives me sword ring because that's my taunt sound on 2 stacks on squish. So if he gets 2 stacks, I hear the sound, I taunt. Because I'm always dying, and I need something like that. Whereas something like Artificer, I don't really necessarily. I'm not going to make a weak aura for that because it's super simple and obvious.
Yeah,
Taunt
you
weak
can
aura.
really just get away with the big wigs timer
Yeah.
on that one.
And that's part of the thing too is if I make a weak aura that gives me a sound or says taunt or something on 2 stacks, and then we're doing something like council where it's a little more fluid, we're not necessarily doing that every time. It bothers me. I don't like it.
Yeah, that's actually why I stopped. So DBM, I don't know if DBM still does this because I haven't used it in years, but that was one thing that really bugged me when I was using DBM. Is that it was always like you get. I remember very distinctly on, what is it, Harjatan, in in gosh,
Tomb of
Tomb of
Sargeras.
Sargeras, yeah,
Yeah.
where it would just like really loud, blaring, like taunt, no
And be like, I
context,
don't want to taunt here.
just taunt, and it's like no, that's wrong here. Depends on the context. So what I do
That's
on weak
actually why I
cards,
switched to big wigs. That
that's
was
exactly
my
when I switched to
reasoning
big wigs.
for
Is
big wigs is that especially as a tank, like I don't want something that tells me what to do. I want it to tell me what's happening,
yeah,
and then I
and then
want
I
to
can
make a
do things.
decision on what I'm gonna do.
Right. So that's the way I design my like tank debuff weak auras is that they just show stacks of whatever. And I will put in color changes or sound effects on things, during in between pulls. Basically, like if I'm like, okay, it's really important that I taunt on 3 here, then I'll go in and add a condition to it and have it play a sound when it reaches 3 stacks.
That's pretty much how I approach it. If we do a poll and Squish is yelling at me because I keep missing the taunts, like in between a poll, throw a weak aura in there. I can do that pretty quickly, so I'll just do that in between polls as things come up, as I'm missing things. Um, on Artificer, like I ate stasis traps like 3 pulls in a row. I don't know why. I don't know why my brain like just wasn't registering. They would spawn under me and I just wouldn't move. And I did that 3 times and I was like, no more. Like went in, put a sound on it, emphasized it, and now as soon as they spawn, I'm like immediately move. I'm ready for
Yep.
it. So that's kind of just how I approach everything. I'll do a pull or two, feel it out, see what I'm not giving enough attention to, and then just adjust something.
I think the main thing that I'm doing right now that I just picked up is before we pull a boss, I go through and I turn off all of the sound effects. I don't know if it's just a me thing or if this is a lot of people, but for one thing, sound like notifications are actually super useful. They're very, very easy to notice in the middle of a fight and really good for grabbing your attention. When they are attached to every single mechanic on the boss, like they are on Hungering Destroyer, there's literally one mechanic in there that does not have it by default in Big Wigs. It's just like I can't focus on anything. It's just like ding, ding, ding constantly. So I go
I will
through
go
and
through,
I turn all of them.
yeah. At the start of a tier, I'll go through it and I will turn off everything that is like DPS specific that does not affect me at all. And then I can turn it back on if we get to Prog and it's like, oh, I do need to actually pay attention to this.
Yeah.
Easy to go in and turn it back on. But anything that's not directly affecting me as a tank, sound goes off because, yeah, like you said, sound is super important to me. I play with game sound on, I play with dialogue on because I use boss voice cues.
Yeah.
Like, they're very important, and yeah, it just becomes this, your brain learns to just tune it out if everything has a sound attached to
Yeah.
it. So I try to pick specific sounds for certain things. So I said like sword ring is my taunt sound. I don't use it for anything else. That is my taunt sound.
Nice.
I don't usually have like specific sounds for things. There's I think one case. I have a weak aura that I will periodically like build and rebuild for different. It's just like, how am I fucking up my rotation right now? Let me build a weak aura that plays a sound effect whenever I do. Like right now, I realized I was really undercasting Blackout Kick, like really, really undercasting it. So I made a weak aura that dinged at me constantly, basically, whenever I cast another ability, but Blackout Kick was off cooldown. And I turned that off relatively quickly because Blackout Kick is a very short range. But yeah,
I had one. I had a WeakAura for a little bit that said "idiot" every time I let shield block drop on my warrior.
Nice.
Nice.
Every time, which got super annoying. But like that's what I wanted for a little while. I
Yeah.
wanted it to just annoy the crap out of me for
Yep.
a little bit
And
when I was kind of learning and getting comfortable with that warrior.
I used that weak aura for Blackout Kick for about a week, and my cast efficiency on that went up quite a lot. So I mean,
Yeah,
it might
sometimes
have
you just
been
need them as
super annoying, but
training
it was
wheels.
also effective.
Sometimes you can just make ones that are not permanent, but just like little, training period. I'm gonna use this. It's gonna annoy the crap out of me for like a week,
Yeah.
and it's gonna make me better.
Yep. Um, yeah, but that's actually one of the things I would recommend. Like that would be my number one recommendation if you are just like if you're rating Mythic and you want to do like a little bit of prep. The two biggest things to do would be go find a video of your role, and then go in bigwigs and turn off everything like in that order, because looking at a video you can figure out what is relevant for you and go into the video planning to make notes and figure out what is relevant to me, what are the timings, what are the whether defensives I can use. If I press my cooldowns, whatever that is. So then you can go into big ways and go like, okay, I don't care about that, or that. Just turn them. Distractions are a huge source of buying.
Yeah, I mean, I literally turn off everything but like major raid damage abilities in my big wigs because like the rest of it, like I don't care about tank deep. Like certain bosses, I'll care about tank debuffs, but like in general, I'll see those on my UI anyway. So it's
Yeah,
like I don't care that like the next stack is coming up. And like other times people will call things. So like for example, like Rip Soul, like our tank's really good about being like, I need cocoon here. So it's like I don't even care when that ability comes up. He'll say something. I think I actually have a weak aura that says it's casting too. So like I think that's the other thing is like if you download one of those weak aura packs from like Relo or
yeah,
whoever it ends up being, like a lot of that is overlap of your bigwigs timers, right? So
yeah,
I generally use bigwigs timers for more like longer term things. So I have mine set to not show many bars or any timers greater than 30 seconds. So like, I'll never see anything that's greater than 30 seconds away, and it's only things that I'll care about. So it's like I can have some timing there, right? In terms of like in 10 seconds, this comes up. And then I make use of not sounds, but I make use of countdowns a lot.
yeah.
And I have different voices. So like for really important ones, it counts down in German at me. So like I know I should pay attention to this. And for like
I like that.
other ones it'll count down in like potentially English, right? It's hasn't been an issue yet. There have been, I think I forget, there was one boss where like they overlap, so I'd get like a German and English countdown overlapping each other,
It really
which was
annoys me.
confusing.
Bigwigs. I
But
don't
yeah.
think it used to do this, but like on Hungering Destroyer, it will. I put a countdown on consume because I need to
Mhm.
start moving the boss 5 seconds before it actually casts. Um, and so it does the countdown to the cast starting, but then it also counts down to the cast ending. I can't
Oh,
turn off the second part. I want to turn off
that's
I
the
don't
annoying.
know
cast
how you
part.
have that set up because I also have a countdown on consume. I don't have that.
Really? Ah,
I don't know what you managed to do there, but yeah,
I
no,
don't know either, but I'm gonna have to take another look at that now.
countdowns are great if it's like I know that I have to be looking at something else and I can't be staring at the timer for this thing,
Yeah,
Mhm.
but I need to know exactly when it is. The best thing that I ever did in Denathrius, like first time I did that, super unprepared, just like you, and it just felt like crazy in phase 3. I just slapped timers on the AoE hand,
yeah.
whatever it
Hand of
is,
destruction.
that one, yeah, and the knockback,
Yep.
Yeah.
um, and two different voices, and like
I really like the
infinitely
idea of using multiple
so much
voices.
easier.
I
So much easier just having like a specific voice for hand, a specific voice for the knockback, and having that being counted down because I feel like I can freely like move around a little bit more, and then when I start to hear the countdown, I'm like, gotta get to the edge.
yeah.
It makes it so much easier.
I
Yeah.
am 100% going to have to start using multiple voices for countdowns because that sounds super useful. And like I'm totally on board with using different sound effects or like specific. So using like a different voice for a different kind of mechanic. Great idea.
Yeah. Yeah, that was something I did probably back in Legion actually. So it's been a while. I've used that for a long time. Just in terms of like helping me understand what important things. It's less important for healers because like I literally care about probably one or two abilities in a fight, so it's not that big a deal. But um, like even when we were doing a Jara, I was real bad about like the knowing where the beam was coming for like the final push. It's like I'd always mess up where I needed to stand for that. So like put a count on that, and that was like really helpful. But yeah, I mean the different voices, different sounds, I think is another big thing. And yeah, turning everything off in bigwigs. Like I did. Oh God, what tier was it? I think it was either all deer or BO, not BOD. I think it was all deer. I basically started with everything turned off in bigwigs, and like did a couple pulls and like would turn stuff off. Like essentially in heroic is when I did this. So like that way, like I knew, all right, these are the things I actually care about. Like if I missed something or I was supposed to use a cooldown somewhere, it was more like, okay, I need to track this versus like leaving everything like clicked. Like I hate looking at this is one of my pet peeves looking at UIs when I literally look at their bigwigs or DBM thing. It's like 12 abilities long. Like you don't care about half those. Like
Yeah.
one of these is important in here and you're missing it because you have 12 other bars counting downs for something like you don't need to know about. So
I don't even look at any of them if we're being honest. Like I use audio cues for just about everything.
Yeah.
And that's where the multiple voices come in and stuff like
yeah.
that.
I use audio cues a lot, but I also have my bigwig set up to where I can very easily, at a glance, look at up in like the next 10 seconds. And like I will use that. But again, audio cues super important because if I look away for a couple of seconds, like on consume, it's very easy to mess that up because I looked away for a couple of seconds back and it's like, oh, consume happening in 2 seconds and it's too late to move the boss.
It's just really helpful, especially as a tank, like to get your eyes up and increase your raid awareness of like not just, so in your own bubble of what you're doing and what the boss is doing, but like what everyone around you is doing, what's happening. It just increases your raid wide awareness. If you're not staring at your weak auras or staring at your bars, you've got audio cues and you can be looking around at what's happening in the fight.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. The other thing is too, I use the faux ability weak aura that like basically turns all your
Yeah.
boss timers to like a timeline view, which is really helpful in terms of seeing it like a different way because I have a bunch of other bars on my screen. I don't need more.
Yeah,
More
I was
movement.
using that. The one I had briefly broke, and I was like, just screw this. It's not maintained anymore. And went back to like big wigs.
Gotcha. It still worked for me. I don't know. It's weird. Somebody else let me know that it broke, but I'm like, I still use the original one. So
Yeah, I mean, if it works
uh,
for you, fantastic.
heck yeah, I can send it to you if you want.
That would
We
actually
can
be
talk later. We can talk later. I'll
fantastic.
hook you up. um, cool. So it sounds like a lot of us do a very similar thing, which is like reduce the amount of information you see on your screen and then add it in later, right? Like I think
Yeah,
that's the big thing.
I
So
think I've done a poor job of that this tier. I did a lot better of a job of that last year. Right now I'm for the past couple bosses, I've basically like after the first pull gone in and turned a bunch of things off instead of preemptively turning most things off and then turning them on later. But yeah,
yeah. So the other side of this is like as you progress, like how do things change? Like how are I guess maybe large changes, just changes in general in strategy sort of handled, right? Because I think that's one of the big things too is like we've talked about you can view like watch a bunch of videos, look at logs, right? Get a general idea of how you should approach the boss, but then like every guild does things slightly different, right? Like
yeah,
DPS timings are always slightly different, like potentially healing checks are different. Even like, the way you tank or the way like your guild does damage or like handles a boss right can be different. So I guess that's the big question is like as after a couple pulls, like how are things changed? Like I mean, I guess I can talk this one first is like generally a lot of what we do is discussed. So we have individual channels, so it's like a healer only thing. We have our own sort of healer chat, even in game, where we will sort of like start to talk about, we'll change something here. We're losing a tank here. Just use a cooldown on them preemptively. Our tanks are in the channel, so they'll realize it's coming, right? But we sort of make micro adjustments like that, and then larger changes. We actually role play a lot. So like we will like put raid markers in the room and basically like move if we're making major changes in like positioning or just like role playing like if this happens what do you do and then like the whole raid has to basically react to it, which is sounds stupid but like at the end of the
it's
day
useful.
like yeah like even if like one or two people end up doing it the right way like generally speaking you can maybe cut like shave off a wipe or two, like we did that for huntsman which was like literally our raid leader would like randomly put marks on people's heads, and so like you ran to the right mark if you got Sin Seeker, and like we did that for like not long, like maybe like a minute or two in between pulls. But then like on Kale, we basically were in the second shade phase. We are going to mirror our positioning from phase one, which is like we always pulled him to the front right corner, walk the front right wall for the first shade phase, and then the second one we're going to go front left and walk it back. But we found based on our timing, all the little ads that explode were in the middle of the room, so it made better sense to just pull them to the back of the room. And so we would use like raid markers, and basically were like blue square was our raid marker. So it's like remember blue square is coming up as we push to that phase, so people could like understand. So um, I mean, I don't know, it's probably very similar, but I don't know if you guys do anything different in terms of like in progression days, like making those types of changes.
Yeah, we do a lot of looking, like, as an example, um, on Hungering Destroyer, we were having a bunch of issues with people dying to the lasers. Specifically cleaving the laser onto one another. So like two people would get it, they would overlap, and they both die because it did so much damage. Um, and that's something where, you know, if you're just paying attention, you can see people dying to it, but it really becomes a more obvious problem when you pull up in logs and you go look at, okay, well, like our number one source of deaths is volatile ejection. We should fix that. And then sit down and, you know, figure out, okay, what are we gonna do to stop this from being a problem? Um, that actually solving the problem for us on that specific mechanic didn't happen until the next raid night, because it was a uh, we started out thinking it was a different. I wasn't looking at the right thing, but yeah. So looking at logs, looking at details, both after polls, figure out what exactly went wrong and how we can avoid it. Sometimes it's obvious. Sometimes you don't need after wipe, but sometimes it is really useful to look at it and go, oh, okay, we didn't make the damage check on Kale because we had um our hunter die during true shot. Oh, okay, that's why. So they didn't actually have their like that. Even if you be res them immediately, and still.
Yeah.
We'll have we almost never make big strategy changes or anything like that in the middle of a raid night. We'll make kind of medium ones, but it'll usually be after a break. And that can kind of help us from like overhauling a strategy just because people aren't used to something or we just need
Yeah.
more pulls on it. But you know, we'll take a break about halfway through the raid night, and almost every break our officers are looking at logs, looking at other people's logs, looking at if there's anything that we need to change. And you know, when we come back from break and reconvene, it's like, all right, here's what we're going to do differently, make any like medium changes like that. And then in between raid nights is usually when they'll do like really deep digging. um, they'll usually have clips of, if they say like, here's what we're dying to, here's the thing that we either need to change or we need to work on, they'll have clips of people screwing it up. They'll
Mm-hmm.
have logs linked. I mean, it's like really detailed stuff. And then, you know, we'll come back for the next raid night, and like before we get there, they'll have already, here's what we're changing in the strat, here's what we're going to change positioning wise. It's on the forums, it's listed. So we make those really big changes in between raid nights.
Gotcha.
Yeah. For the really big ones, I think it's basically the same for us. Partially just because figuring out the really big changes in the space of like a break is like figuring out big strat changes takes time.
Yeah.
But smaller adjustments, we'll do those either between pulls or on a break, depending on how big of a change it is, how much we actually need to figure out in order to implement change.
Yeah.
I'm curious, have you guys had something where you think you uh overcorrected and like made too big of a strat change in order to solve?
I'm trying to think. It would have to be nothing this tier. I mean, it would have to be Nyalotha stuff.
There's definitely something in Nihilith, but I don't remember what
Yeah.
it was now.
I think you know what, for us it was probably Il'gynoth, weirdly enough, in terms of like positioning. So we ended up, if I remember correctly, we ended up micromanaging our ranged positioning. Or
Mm,
actually our boss positioning in terms of like the lasers that drop puddles. I tanked Nihilithus, so I don't know. I guess this
yeah,
happened, but there was like puddles everywhere at some point. I don't know how they got there. But yeah, we micromanaged that positioning in terms of we had camps, and the camps moved in like specific directions, like as they came out. So like the
that
beams
sounds
went. I
really
feel
complicated.
yeah, and I'm like ultimately, I think at the end of the day, we're just like just move, like just stay away from certain areas at this point, and then move, and like yeah, the other thing was like every time a tank beam came, like I had to call out a tank beam was coming because we lost people. I'm like, can't you like
Yeah.
there's a skull marker. That means it's bad. Like just don't stand near that. But
Yeah,
yeah,
I
I
mean,
think
that's something like two birds, one stone. You have people stand in one quadrant or like two quadrants of the room at the time, and you have the tank
yeah,
beam not there. And if
exactly.
someone
Yeah.
gets hit by it,
They were wrong twice. But yeah,
yes,
I think Ilganoth might be a good example of where we overcorrected because at a certain point I think we just stopped doing that, right? But I think that was one of those ones where we spent probably a night wiping to it and then like thinking the issue was like puddle placement when really it was just like people just need to generally be more personally responsible for like what they're doing, right? Um, that's probably the only example. Like nothing at this tier.
I've got one from this
We,
tier.
I well, I oh sorry,
Oh,
yeah.
go ahead.
No, I was gonna say we overcorrected on Huntsman and Heroic when we had to use every personal cooldown and like external on people got Sinseeker the first night we pulled it when the
That's
dot was
not
doing like
you overcorrecting. That's
12K
the
a
boss
tick. It was
being broken.
awful. Yeah, it's true. That's
Um,
true.
but so on Hungering Destroyer, we went in like I was talking about the lasers, and that was a real thing. Um, And so I went in and I did, pull out clips and pull out logs, and it's like, here's what's killing us. Here's an example of like the kinds of overlaps that are killing us. And I basically wrote in my notes for it that there were two different things I thought we could try to fix the thing. One of them is that we could just do something really kind of basic, like all the lasers always go left. And, if there's two people in the same marker that get it, they both go left, and one of them goes more left. And it's not that complicated. It's easy to remember, and no real other changes to the strat. And the other option that I brought up, which I regret bringing up because this is where we overcorrected, um, I mentioned that we could try this variation on the limit positioning strategy, which, if you've seen it, they don't do the four markers around the boss, the Vectis style thing. They just have the range spread out in the back, got the melee on one side of the boss, and the tanks on the other, and the lasers, if you're melee, go to the front of the room. If they're ranged, you just spread out, so you just don't hit anybody else, just don't stack. And that's great. The ranged get to stand still, which is all they ever want to do, and the melee get to sit there and hit the boss, which is all they ever want to do, and everybody's happy. Except we didn't have the number of immunes required to actually clear with immunes every time to let the range. So we had to change it slightly. And the way that we changed it, I think it could have worked, but it was so much more difficult. We ended up spending, I think, an hour and a half, workshopping that before just doing like lasers go left, lasers go left.
Yeah,
Sometimes like there's a strat that looks like it'll be better in the long term, and sometimes it's just better to say lasers go.
yeah. It's like you method. I don't know if you remember Method's strategy on Maiden of Virtue.
No.
Um, but so they ended up. So that strategy was pretty simple when you did it. Was I don't know if you did the fight, but basically you had like all your light colored people on one side, all the green colored people on the other. But the way Method did it was they rotated around the boss when they killed it.
That's what we did.
Oh, you did it too. Okay, so that seems like over complicated in terms of like
It's
a strategy.
actually super simple and great for tanks and melee. Ranged hated it
I can
because we were
imagine.
moving a lot. But yeah, it was. I actually really liked that. I really
Okay.
liked that strat. I think it made it a lot simpler because there was just less to think about. Like
Yeah.
you just rotate. All you have to do is call rotate, and you're not worrying about the different groups or whatever.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, you definitely lose a lot of your ranged DPS when they are literally constantly rotating around the boss.
Yeah. Yeah. It reminds me too, and I'll go way back to like the first time we killed Thaddeus in Nax
Oh
40, so
God.
in Classic. And we had this complicated so in that fight had a similar like you got charged either plus or minus, right? Polarity charges. And so like all the plus charged people had to stand on each other and all the negatively charged people had to stand on each other. And if you swapped, you basically killed the raid. And we had this complicated way of dealing with like because they would change every couple, I don't know the time, it will say 20, 25 seconds. We had this complicated way of doing it when like would have been easier if we just been like, if you change, go to the left, and if you don't change, go to the right, or something like that. That was how we did it, but that doesn't make sense in my head. Anyway, it was like a very complicated way of like, what marker did you have? Did you change or not? And then which way did you go based on if you changed or not? It was like, yeah. When we could have just been like, here's the positive camp, here's the negative camp, just like move towards them
Yeah.
and you're
Just
fine.
go
So
to your marker.
yeah.
Do not stand still. Pay
We didn't
attention to
have raid
mechanics.
markers back then, Emerson. This was like in the 1500s, dude. Like barely had. I don't even have marks. We had 8 debuff slots. All right, I was a warlock. I did nothing but bring blood pact.
And soulstones.
Oh well,
Or sorry,
no.
health stones.
I only the tanks got those because I wasn't farming
You
like
weren't
80 soul shards before a raid to hand them out individually. So, God,
lazy warlock.
that was. I feel like I've played a game. Like I'm talking about this stuff, and neither of you know what I'm talking
Oh, I know
about.
exactly what you're talking about.
I guess
Well,
you have,
I don't.
not the
we
boss
have
fight, but
we
I
have classic now, so you can relay.
I played a lot in Burning Crusade and have played on the classic private servers before WoW Classic on retail was a thing.
Gotcha. Yeah. But in any event, yeah, I mean, it sounds like then like for strategy stuff, I mean, we'll make it's funny like my guild will make maybe not large changes, but like we'll make pretty substantial changes like over our breaks. We get like a 10-minute break in the middle, so like when we do changes, it's very much that way. And a lot of it is like we use ERT notes, I guess, for a lot of this stuff. So we'll communicate a lot of those changes through that. So like we won't, like I said, like I mentioned, earlier, we don't have healer cooldowns there, but like anything that ends up changing, we will generally call out that or anything we're failing at, right? So like particularly if DPS are not good at something, because it's mostly our DPS players that mess up because our healers are perfect and our tanks are can't yell at them, they're okay. Um yeah, like we'll put like interrupt orders in there, just like stuff like that. But major strategy changes we'll call out. So like that blue square thing, we had like just a blue square in the note. So it was like a 4x4 square of blue squares in the ERT note, just at like second shade, and like so we knew where to go. But yeah, no, yeah, it sounds like a very. I mean, it sounds like a lot of the strategy changes are handled very much how like the initial one is done. Like right, like ours are done in Discord channels. You know, Kiev, it sounds like yours are done in the forums, right? So those forums are. Dude, that sounds so cool. Brings me back. Brings me back to when I wasn't a boomer.
Yeah, my guild knows where it's at.
Yeah, exactly. That's awesome. That's awesome.
Honestly, like my guild has had issues with people being too shitposty, too memey in the boss threads. And things get lost when that happens. People see, oh, there's 400 new messages. They start reading through it and they're like, oh, these are all shit posts. Never mind.
Yeah,
Ignoring the fact that 400 messages up, there is actually a strategy change they need
yeah.
to know about. And
Yeah, that's why I would say
we've
the
been getting
locking
better
thing
about
is
that,
good.
but I think forums actually might be a step up there because it takes a lot more
Actually, the play.
Yeah.
to shit post on a forum. I have experience with that. There's an old forum I was on, no longer exists, and I had I think 40,000 posts on it. So I am very experienced at shit posting on multiple mediums.
I'm banned from the WoW forums on 2 accounts, three accounts at this point.
Wow,
So.
bad boy.
Yeah, my current one's good though. I can post all I want on the beta forums. I'm good. I'm the you heard me right. I'm on the beta forums. I can post there.
Yeah, okay, you got beta.
I got beta twice actually.
Yeah, you and it seems like everybody else I know got beta on multiple accounts.
I got alpha.
Oh yeah,
Nice.
well I didn't. Oh God, Kiev, you can't put like punch him when he's down. We can't talk about that stuff. We talk about those friends and family fun that we have.
Man, Abe got alpha too. He was
Yeah,
very excited to tell me that. I was like, oh man, I'm so jealous. I can't wait to get beta.
I'm
yeah,
on I'm on someone's friends and family
yeah.
list for alpha.
Yeah, I need to get on someone's friends and family list for alpha. Apparently,
Just go
that's the way
just
to
go to
go.
BlizzCon next BlizzCon, Emerson. We
Fingers
can.
crossed there will be one.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Meet some devs.
um, but anyway, anything else you two want to hit on this topic before we move on to the Q&A?
No, I think that to sort of maybe tie it with a bow and wrap it up, I think the biggest thing, just in terms of what we talked about today, are things like even as a lesser progressed guild you can do, right? It's sort of like the biggest thing is sort of prepping before you go in, watching a video, going through at least a log of like a similar composition that you'll enter the boss with. It's very simple to do that in Warcraft logs to search for like if you're a tank, here's your tank and your co-tank. If you're a healer, looking like searching for healer comps with specific kills, right?
Yeah.
Seeing when they use stuff, and then ultimately it's having like I think a common way to approach every boss fight is always helpful. So like making sure that your raid team understands like you're gonna post stuff in Discord or you're gonna post stuff on the forums or you know what I mean. Um, and then I think the other thing is just communicating, right? Like I think Kiev, you said like the big thing is like as you progress up, like the biggest thing is people talk a lot more in a raid. It's not like about stupid things or like random things, but it's more of just like, call outs or, you
And
know,
clear, concise callouts is
yeah.
super important too.
Yeah.
Yeah. But if I had to give like a if I had to give a like number one thing that I would do that's brought me up, like moving up into where I am, get like slightly comfortable with weak auras, like just to the point where you
Oh
can
yeah.
make something in between pulls quickly. Just super basic. Make a taunt weak aura. It's my cat. Uh,
Yeah, your cat's been
but
on camera a few times.
that, and then just like analyze your UI, your weak auras, and like what they're doing for you. Like, don't just continue to mess up a mechanic over and over and over again and say, "Oh, I just need to get better at that." Like, so many people do that. They'll be messing something up and go, "Oh, I just need to get better. I need to stop being bad." Like, make a weak aura, emphasize it in big wigs, do something to your UI to make it not an issue anymore. Like, if something is an issue multiple times, like more than just once or twice, you got to do something. You got to
Yeah.
make a weak aura. You got to make a UI change to draw your attention to that thing.
One of the things that's very unique about WoW is that it is such a tools heavy game. Like we have all these add-ons, we've got logs, we got all of this stuff that we can use to assist in killing a boss. And like if you look at the top guilds, they have people, they actually like Limit and Echo both had people basically full time working on weak Rs and boss mods while they were during progression. Having
Mhm.
good tools is so important. You definitely shouldn't ignore it. Like just installing bigwigs or DBM is not enough. No.
Not even close to.
Yeah. 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 I mean, that's what, funnily enough, that's what I did on Kale. I made a weak aura specifically for like my healing buffs. Cause like healing a NPC is not something I'm used to. So I literally have a weak aura that's just a row of like essence font buff, soothing mist, like renewing mist, like all those things. And like, as long as they're lit up, I know I'm doing the right thing. If they're not lit up, I have to change what I'm doing. Right. So that was like a big thing I did for that fight. Cause like, number one, I never look at my target frame. So like my target frame is really small, like the bottom of my UI, like I don't care about it. And then like I don't have a like my focus frame was like off doing something else. So like for me, that was like a big UI change. So yeah, weak cores are definitely key. It's a good point. So so cool. We're ready, Emerson. Can I do Q&A time? I'm
You can
so
do Q and
excited.
A.
Oh man. All right. So it's my favorite part of the show. We get to do questions and answers. So again, people who listen to this regularly, you guys can send your questions in to Emerson and myself. We literally will answer any of them. We talked about pineapple pizza at one point. We talked about how Emerson has terrible taste in cookies. We'll talk about anything. So we have a couple of questions today we'd like to go through. So first up is from Anyo, which I believe this is actually Onion from Anyan, Anyo. And they ask, when are you, and this was particularly directed towards me, removing slow mode? Um, and the answer is the same as always, give it's never. So for people who don't know this, the Mist discussion channel has been in slow mode pretty much since like mid beta cycle. I did it primarily because like people just freaked out every time hot fixes or like data mining was posted. They're like, "Oh, we're terrible again," because they nerfed something or they changed something,
Have
right?
you
So
tried playing a better spec anom? Because we didn't have this problem in the Brewmaster channel. Maybe
no,
we should have had this problem because of how things panned out, but we didn't have that problem.
no, it was awful. Like every hot fix day or every beta push day was just like a stream of people coming in being like, "Monks are terrible again." It's just like a clip of something like with red, like the WoW had like red number changes. I'm just like, I can't deal with this. So 15-second slow mode, all here to stay. I think it's been helpful. I'm never removing it. So if I did the whole like not a, like I think Windwalker, I don't know if Brewmasters do this, but I know Windwalkers have like a public theory crafting channel, and
Yeah.
there's like a not a theory crafter role that you can give people where they can't post it. I do
Oh,
that, but
we need
like
to set that up.
Yeah, but like Mistweaver, like I don't think we'll ever do a public theory crafting channel for Mistweavers because like we just post everything in discussions anyway. So just leave that to slow mo.
Brewmaster, ours is called craft brewing, and so we alternately have people posting their trade skill questions.
More often than you would think.
Or just posting like regular old brewmaster questions. Like, I'm not sure.
That's like an example of not reading the room. Like if I come into a channel, I don't just immediately post something in
Read it
what I
first.
think that channel is. I read like at least a little bit up. Like it's just a couple messages up and like
A lot of
doesn't
people
take
don't.
very long. Doesn't take very long to realize like this is a theory crafting channel.
Yeah.
Or
Or
my
when
question was answered literally 2 messages up. It was the very last thing that was talked about,
like
but, you know, people don't do that.
we've been getting a lot of questions, and this is kind of segueing into one of our. Or, well, we'll touch on this on another question. We've got a lot of questions about Uazala in the other side. And I saw the other day, very literally, someone came in and asked, okay, how do I deal with this mechanic? They got told to look at the pins. And the very next message was someone asking to deal with that same exact mechanic.
Love it.
And they got like 50 reactions to their post that were just like pins. Pins, 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 pins.
It's so
So,
it's so
I don't understand not reading things. Like,
My my thing for, like, Discord, especially in class Discords, that I wish everyone would do is I will check pins, I will check articles and resources, and I would, like, do my research and use the resources that are out there. And then I will go with any remaining questions that I have and go to the Discord. And that's usually where you get into like deeper level discussion anyway.
yeah.
right.
And
And
it's
so many
super.
people come in and just ask, what stats do I want? And it's like,
Oh god.
go look at a guide.
Yep.
Hey, you got a best in
really
slot?
not
Do you,
that
my
do you
hard.
have a
favorite.
best in slot list? I need a best in slot list. Do you have best in slot list?
My favorite right now is do brewmasters use dual wielding or two-handed? We get that one so much. It's
It's
covered
in like
in the
every
guide.
guide, right?
It's
And
covered
it's in
in the
pins.
pins, and it's covered in brew resources. It is covered in 3 different places, and you clearly did not look at any of them.
Yeah.
It's just that people, I mean, it's some degree of laziness,
Yeah.
right? I think it's I'll give people the benefit of the doubt. It's some degree of laziness and it's some degree of maybe not knowing how to access the resources. Like if people are really new either to the game or to Brewmaster and they don't know what's out there. Um,
That's true.
but I think Peak does such a good job of trying to make those resources really readily available and having that information out there in multiple guides, in pins, and just doing just a little bit of
Reading.
looking on your own, before coming in and asking questions. It can kind of help us keep the discussion and the question answering like a little bit deeper
Yeah.
and keep the vets a little bit more sane
Mm-hmm.
and willing to answer questions because we all are just volunteering our time to do this.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yep.
I 100. By the way, I vet Mistweaver people who just answer questions I don't want to answer. Like if you sit in like Mistweaver questions long enough and just answer the most mundane questions, I'll give you vet. Like I'm fine with that.
There's a couple people that have been answering a lot of questions and brew questions recently that might be under consideration if we end up wanting more vets, but yeah.
I'm
It's
definitely I'm a little more guilty of definitely don't really want to spend my time answering the stuff that's in the guides, especially when it's
yeah.
like guides that I wrote and I'm like, I
Yeah.
know that it's in there.
Oh,
Like,
when like week 1, like the week that everybody started crafting their legendaries, and like which legendary we craft, which slot do we craft it in? I linked my guide over and over in brew questions. I was just like, someone ask it, copy paste, paste, paste,
but
paste, paste.
I am here for the deeper discussion stuff. Like, I think that's what excites all of us. Like, that's
Yeah.
why that's why
Yeah.
we are vets. That's why we do what we do. Like, we all really enjoy our specs and the deeper level of our specs and having those discussions. And I feel like it's we definitely don't get to do that as much when we're distracted constantly with what stats should I craft on my legendary.
Mhm.
Exactly. Well, cool. Well, Onion, thank you for the question. I think we talked a little bit outside of what you wanted, but the answer is never removing slow mode. But yeah, discussions are fun. Answering questions about stats, best in slot lists. Do I have enough haste? They get old very quickly. But thank you for the question. All right, so next up we have Soji. These are easy names this week. Hashtag delete SEF. And they ask, if you were to make a new WoW class based in an archetype from a movie, show, or series, like for example, based on a Jedi, what would it be? Give some examples, abilities if you can. Maybe explain why it's been a cool addition to the game if it has a specific niche. Niche,
Niche.
whatever, same thing. The class could fulfill that don't already exist. Yeah, just sort of just explain the class, and then you could make it. I guess they also say you could assume a different IP doesn't matter. Changes will be made to make it fit the IP. So like
So
you could do like a future based class. So
so I'm gonna lay a hot take on us right off the bat. I would do a drunken brawler, like Jackie Chan Drunken Master.
Isn't that what we are?
Brewmaster does such a poor job of that.
But it is
It
but it
has
is what we
one
are.
ability. It's got one ability.
that's
Yeah.
true.
I don't know. That's I would say that Windwalker very well fits the like martial arts kind of theme in fantasy, and Brewmaster, like all of our defensive stuff is all you press a button and a little sound effect plays and that's it. There's definitely a lot of room for that, you know, very evasive, tricksy kind of fantasy. And Brewmaster has little bits of it. And like I actually just want that. And if they're not going to make it Brewmaster, I would like to see that
What
as a new
would
thing.
you? So here, just hear me out here. So speaking about this drunken baller thing, would you just want Captain Jack Sparrow as like a playable character in the game? Like he
That
feels very
wasn't what I was
monk-like.
thinking of,
He's a
but
pirates are sweet. Pirates are super cool. He's got a
mm,
sword, and a gun. Like that would be a pretty cool.
so
No, I feel
li-
I'm getting a
this is
blank stare
very
from
literally
Geoff
what an
here.
outlaw rogue is, right?
No, he's drunk. No.
I mean,
So this
yes,
is a really
but
tough
yeah,
question. Like for me, like I don't know what I would make. Like it's tough to do like archetypes because WoW has a lot of them already. Like I
yeah.
think the one area they're probably like maybe not one area, but one area that I would like to see is so Wildstar had a ranged tank class,
Oh
which I
God,
think would be
keep
an
that shit away from
interesting.
me.
That would be an interesting thing to put into WoW. I don't know if it probably wouldn't work because like you'd probably use it on pretty much every fight anyway. Because like a tank that doesn't need to be in melee range is probably pretty powerful. In any event, that would be maybe cool, right? In terms of like you tanked at range, like you had abilities to keep bosses away from you. But I mean, like honestly, like I just want the class we had to be fun. Like, let's be honest with ourselves. Like, I just want to be good again. I feel like for me, like Monk has been my favorite class. I don't think I'd change that. So like it's really hard for me to think about like. I mean, Jedi would not be. I mean, I don't know. I don't think I'd add anything to the game. Like, I think we
There's
have enough
so
classes.
like on the note you made about the range tanks, people very frequently post on having a pet tank, like making Beast Mastery Hunter a tank, and having actually like back when I was a casual, I thought that sounded super cool. Um, Now having actually like tanked in Mythic, like
Imagine like
never, do not ever do
imagine
that.
micromanaging a
Please
pet,
never
not
do that.
yourself. Imagine micromanaging a pet,
Imagine
along with
micromanaging
moving the
boss
boss.
positioning with a pet.
Oh god, that sounds absolutely horrid. Absolutely
Yeah,
horrid.
yeah, it does.
Oh man. Yeah, I mean, I'm
That would make
sorry.
me quit the game.
Real
Like the day that someone asks me to co-tank like with someone's pet, like I'm out.
game over. Game over. That's hilarious.
uh,
Yeah. Sorry, Soji. I don't think we're not very creative
oh well,
individuals.
Kiev,
I'd
did you
say.
have
I'm
any?
definitely
Yeah.
no, like I mean on Anam's point, I love Monk. I love Monk class fantasy. I love Brewmaster class fantasy, but like not really the one that Blizzard pushes. Like,
Yeah, that's where I'm at. Yeah.
yeah, but I Monk is everything that I want to be. I wish Brewmaster was a little better, but we had a good run in BFA. We'll give it a bit. We're definitely, I can't say we're awful, right, in Raid.
Yeah, I mean, World
But
Second was Brewmaster Vengeance, so
yeah, there's been several Denathrius Brewmaster Vengeance, so we're viable. We're good. I'm not super creative. I love Avatar: The Last Airbender. That's my jam. So, like, if I had to pick something, right, like, I think a bender would be cool, and I guess you could use elements as different specs. Like Earthbender tank and like
and
Waterbender healer, I guess.
so this is kind of where Anam's point of that there just being a lot of classes in the game already. We run into that because that's kind of what a
Oh
shaman
yeah,
is,
no,
right?
I don't want more classes. And also,
Yeah,
yeah, shaman's pretty similar.
because like
But
I
no, we
could
have way too many. Blizzard can't balance the classes that we have right now. Like,
yeah
we do not need more.
Yeah.
yeah yeah no joke.
Oh man. All right. Well, Soji, thank you for the question, and thank you for having an easy name. All right, so we have one more question tonight,
I want to
and
hear
it
you pronounce this one.
is from. Oh God. So hold on. They ping me. Okay. Oh God. Okay. They ping me how to say their name. So I'm gonna. I can't. I forget what they said, but I'm gonna pull it up afterwards. All right. So this question comes from U- U- Uji.
You
Ouiji.
got closer than I expected, to be totally
Ouiji,
honest.
right? Ouiji. Is that so?
It's
Hold on. They
Ouija.
actually.
Ouija.
Is it Ouija?
Yeah.
You pronounce this Ouija.
Mhm.
Oh. So I
Like
was. I
if
just
you
didn't.
look
I
at the
didn't even say the O.
OUI and you pretend you're French, oui, G, Ouija.
I'm not French.
You're not French. It shows.
So, so that's a okay. So Ouija, I would have said I would have said Ouija. Yeah, I was close. I would have pronounced the O. Okay. Anyway, Ouija is that how you spell we?
That
OUI in French? Seriously? God, dude. Okay. Anyway, it's not right. Okay.
dude,
Ouija
French
asks.
spelling is wild.
I'm so glad I skipped that language. God, my wife would kill. My wife's like half French, dude. She'd kill me right now. Cool. So
Nobody
hi.
clip this.
Yeah, don't tell her. She wouldn't. She doesn't watch this stuff anyway. Ouija asks, "Hi, question that I haven't found the answer to." Well, Ouija, we're here to answer these. Can you proc the Phaline reset on another monk's Phaline, or do you have to be standing on your own line to reset the proc?
As far as we know, you have to be standing on your own.
Yeah, that was my understanding. They actually pinged me this. I was like, I have zero idea because I don't know another monk that went Night Fae. But
We have two in my guild. We could actually test this. I could put Phaline down. Well, here's the thing. You have to. So we would both have to cast it and then like swap Phalines.
right, and see if they
It's a very
reset.
difficult situation to construct.
Yeah, it'd be
The
weird.
craziest thing would be if it actually did work and also the proc rate went up if you stacked multiple of them.
Interesting. Yeah. Oh,
But
we should
th-
test
Alright,
this. But yeah,
no, that's all speculation. Please, nobody quote that. That's
I
just
wanna I
speculation.
wanna see some logs. I think that would be pretty broken.
It would be. It would be
yeah,
super broken. You
I
would
don't
stack
I
a
don't
whole
think Blizzard would do that.
like Night Fae is already pretty good, and if it were to actually work like that, you would just stick a bunch of Windwalkers in a group, and they would study damage,
yeah,
and because they would just have like Phalanx stomp every other. That's a. It's pretty hard.
yeah. So yeah, so I think Ouija. I was about to say Ouija again. Ouija does we believe it does not reset on another monk's
But
Phalanx.
Emulsion's gonna get us logs to prove it.
Yeah.
I'll see.
So we'll see. This and then the second part of their question, which I'm not I don't know what any of this means. I don't tank, but I'm assuming this is what we just talked about. But they ask as a follow up question. It's a totally different thing, not really a follow up. So just as a second question, I guess we could say. Um, with this whole issue with the last boss of DOS, can statue be used to take the hit if we aren't in melee for Soul Crusher? So
So
I'm assuming
quick,
this is that like
yeah, quick thing before we get into answering the question. What he's asking about is Muazala and the other side, where the boss has this mechanic called Crush Soul that puts a dot on you. The mechanic is Soul Crusher and the dot is Crush Soul, something like that. Um, and he casts it fairly frequently. It's about 5 times per phase, and holy shit, does it hurt? The way it's supposed to work is that you press a mitigative ability before it hits you, and then it applies a dot based on how much damage it actually did to you. Now, there's a trick here because it doesn't count absorbs for mitigation,
Or
meaning
stagger.
or stagger. because stagger is an absorb. And that means that brewmasters basically always take full damage from it. Now, there's also a
And
second
it
part to that bug where so it determines its damage based on the initial hit, which obviously scales with key level. So the boss, when it does its initial hit, that scales up based on tyrannical and based on what level of key you're in. But then the dot scales again. The dot gets scaled up by tyrannical and by keystone level. So like, what's a 15? 150%, 200%, 300%?
I don't know, but I can tell you how hard it hit me in a 15.
All right, yeah, go for it. It's like
I have a log.
130k from one over 10 seconds, and that's triple my HP.
That's crazy.
So yeah, it really hurts, and so we have had a lot of questions this week about how to deal with that mechanic. And actually, one of the people in chat here, Ardoin Live, asked, in reference to our discussion about it earlier, does anybody else ask tank it? Which is this thing where you turn around so that you can't dodge, and you try to spin around as he's casting it with 100% dodge chance, and
The answer is no.
guarantee dodge. And the answer is no, because you can't do that reliably. If you
Because it melees, and I have multiple logs, as short as 0.2 seconds before the cast starts, he can melee. And the actual cast itself is 0.51 seconds long consistently. So if you, from the time that the cast starts, if you can flip yourself around in 0.51 seconds consistently, go for it. But it is really hard.
so WoW doesn't have like a flip your character around key binding, does it? Some games do.
I don't think so. You
For WoW
could
right now.
turn your camera and then just move, like,
Yeah.
turn your camera and then move forward, and it
Yeah.
would flip you. But the problem is, aside from doing it from the very first one, I messed around with it. I've done quite a few the other side 15s this week, and I definitely used some of them for just testing with people that really didn't want to be there doing that, but we did it anyway. um, uh, aside from the very first one, like, if you flip yourself around, you're probably gonna just die because you've still got the Soul Crusher dot on you. And then he goes immediately into another one. And timing it, he's got a lot of spell queued stuff, so timing
Yeah.
it is
Sometimes there's not
really
even.
bad.
Sometimes there's
So
not even. Sorry. Go ahead.
I would flip around like way too early because it would be spell queued and then just die before he could even cast it. I would flip around. He would melee me right before it, and I either didn't get enough dodge to consistently dodge, so I'd take a melee and then still take the Soul Crusher, or like wasn't able to flip around in 0.5 seconds. It's wild. Like, forcing a dodge on that is absolutely ridiculous. I have many logs of a dodge that I forced 0.2 seconds before, and then him hitting me for the full Soul Crusher. So
Yikes.
Yeah. So we have a pin now in Brew Questions detailing our actual answer, which is plan your cooldowns, coordinate with your healer, and well, hope you can do it in one phase because you're a brewmaster and you have cooldowns. So, but to answer Ouija's actual question of can you use statue to take the hit? No. Basically, because if nobody's in melee range, nobody at all, the boss will do a slam on the platform and basically kill your entire group instantly. So if you,
it is instantly, by the way, in
yeah,
case anyone was wondering, several pulls, I died. That slam happens instantly. There
yeah,
is no dying and getting a B res off if no one is in melee. So my best recommendation is, if you are tanking this boss and you're doing it with an all ranged comp, which I was, have someone who is not a B reser in melee range, because you're probably likely to die at some point and gonna need to get V-res, and it will instantly wipe your group if no one's in melee. So just pick a ranged, have them stand with you in melee the whole time.
So I have not tested using statue on this boss. Typically, bosses are marked with a special flag that has them ignore the damage reduction that Black Ox statue has, which means that it's going to have 0 armor, 0 damage reduction, anything when it's hit by a boss. And it has as much HP as you do, and the raw melee hits are more than our HP. It's just going to get one shot by a melee attack. So
Far before I can take a.
Yeah, and like Kiev was saying, there's a melee hit immediately before the Soul Crush very often. So even if he would attack the statue, I have no idea if he will. Even if he would attack it, the success rate of getting him to Soul Crush the statue is going to be extremely low. Same thing.
There's no way to get him to have to switch aggro to the statue. And if you put the statue down at the start of the fight, he melees at least 3 times before the first.
Yeah, I mean, I think the idea was that you would drop it and then run out, but that takes longer than just spinning around.
Yeah, but if you drop it and run out, that thing's gonna be dead.
Yeah,
but
exactly.
long before the pressure happens, because it's the first is.
Someone was asking in Brew Questions yesterday or the day before if you could use pet taunts. Do you know if you can pet taunt bosses in Mythic Plus? I know you can on trash, but I don't know if you can on bosses.
That's a great question.
Because that would be one thing.
Someone sacrifice someone for it, and again we get into the problem of that cast is so fast.
Yeah,
it's so fast, and he melees right before it. I would not really trust a hunter's reaction time to be able to reliably pet taunt that in 0.5 seconds.
So Black Ox statue is special. It doesn't actually have armor. It's got a special damage reduction aura on it that bosses are supposed to ignore. Sometimes they don't get it right, like Rastakhan in BOD. But by and large, they ignore that, so they just one-shot it. Hunter pets don't have that aura. So a hunter pet, like a turtle that you use a defensive on before they taunt, would, in theory, at least on a lower key, survive an auto attack or two. They would then very much die to the Soul Crush, but that's better than you dying to it. So
in case anyone was wondering, to pull log up, 15 tyrannical Lozala hits for, I believe this one was unmitigated, nothing but just stagger, 11k per tick, so 11k per second. It ticks every second for 5 seconds, or it ticks for longer than that, but
9
I
seconds.
took.
And I think it ticks.
Oh, I probably died. That's probably why it stopped.
Yeah,
that makes more sense.
I think it ticks immediately too, so it's actually 10 ticks total. So yeah, it hurts real bad.
Dampen's actually really good for it. On a 15, I was getting, what did you say, 47%?
47% damage
just about full damage reduction out of that dampen. So it's back up to if you use it first.
Yeah.
For the second, the first one that you take if you don't immediately kill the boss when you come back around.
Yeah, which is actually hard to do on Tyrannical. You can kill all of the, you can do all of the platforms and come back to the main platform and have him at 15% health or whatever, 10%. You need to get him to 10% health. The Wansambi things do 80% health, meaning that you have to do another 10% of his HP between the first and the second time you're in that. So you do have to actually do damage to the boss. Wansambi is not going to carry you the whole way to the finish.
Yeah, this dude's lazy, man.
But yeah, basically, unless anyone knows a healer that can do 11k HPS,
you're gonna die.
You have to have some kind of straight DR for every single one. And ours, in my 15 that we actually did chest, we had a full. I took 5 and then another 4 before we actually killed it.
Yeah.
So.
This is when I expect that in the relatively near future we will get one of 2 hotfixes for this mechanic. Either number 1, they will hotfix it so the stagger works on it, or just absorbs in general work on it.
I don't think they will.
I don't think they'll do that one. I think we're more likely to get number 2, which is that making it so the dot doesn't also scale with key level and dungeon effect, because that's really the kicker. What was the initial Crush Soul hit that you got hit for? 40k?
Oh, I think it was more than that. The Soul Crusher when it hit me.
Yeah, the physical hit.
It was 64k unmitigated.
So then after armor, it's going to be like 45k, like that.
It was that one I had Earth and Wall. It was about
Well, regardless, 60k is already half of the actual magic hit that you took, right? And that's way more reasonable because 60k over 10 seconds is fuck. I can't do math. Hang on, I'm pulling up a calculator. Yeah, real quick, 6,000 damage per second. So that is still very high, very very high.
considerably less than almost 12k per second.
Yeah. So the vegetable man is telling us in Twitch chat that anecdotally pet taunt does not work on it. Tried with a hunter the other day and it did not get aggro on it. And so then Kate says in chat that Spirit Link would work as well. Yeah, like using healer externals, Spirit Link in the dungeon is a healer external. Don't let anybody tell you otherwise. Barrier, like literally, Disc Priest is maybe not the best healer in keys, but they can drop a barrier on you, and they do have pain suppression, both of which are
The
very
really
good for
tricky
this.
part about Spirit Link that I actually died to is if you're using it for any of the ones that overlap with Master of Death,
Nobody
and you
else is
drop
gonna
it
be.
in melee, and he immediately does where you have to run to the back of the platform.
Yeah, and then nobody's in it anymore, and you die. Yeah,
It's rough. That's rough. This boss sounds awful.
oh, it
Just
is.
the rest of
The boss is actually, I like the boss. I
Yeah,
think it's
okay.
a cool
Sorry.
mechanic. It just,
Scaling of it's
they decided
totally
to make
fucked.
it not work with Brewmaster. Like, Brewmaster literally cannot tank the boss on anything higher than a 15. And even the 15, we chested it. I still died. I still died on the boss. We had someone in melee and we had a Boomkin like ready to go with that res. Like, uh, I don't know that there's any avoiding that really.
Yeah, right now there is a hard cap to the level you can go to with a Brewmaster tank in the other side. No other dungeon, it really like your tank really doesn't matter in most other dungeons aside from like, I mean, Vengeance is obviously very good for multiple reasons, but you can do high keys on anything except in the other side, in which case you cannot play a Brewmaster for high keys.
It just I don't think I could really go higher than a 15. And I'm a geared Brewmaster. I'm 220. Uh and I was playing with geared party members, and it just there's no counterplay when you're taking
That much
9 soul
damage.
crushers over the course of a fight and you just run out of damage reduction. Like,
And that's so comparing to Prot Paladin, which is not the tankiest tank right now. Shield of the Righteous gives armor, and that does work. So you can get a very high level of armor just with your regular active mitigation. You don't even need to press a major cooldown for every single Soul Crush. You probably should
yeah,
for some of them.
no other tank has to cooldown every single soul crusher. It's not like this is this crazy ability. It hits really hard, but they designed it to be you have to mitigate it, and like maybe if you're low you need to pop a cooldown for it, you know, and your healer needs to pump you a little bit, but like your mitigation should work on it, and it just Brewmaster's mitigation doesn't work.
Like at least Blood DK is in a similar state where they don't really mitigate damage before it happens. They now have Rune Tap, or sorry, Blood Tap, which is a low cooldown damage reduction ability that they can use on every single one. Well, maybe not literally every single one, but they can go, you know, Blood Tap, IBF, Blood Tap, AMS. Like they've got Blood DK is basically made of cooldown, so they can handle it better than Brewmaster can, even though their thing is taking the damage and healing it back.
Gotcha. That sucks for you guys. As a healer, I'm just never running with a Brewmaster. Luckily, the tank I run with the most is a Vengeance DK or DH. Sorry. So
Yeah,
You and everyone else, yeah.
yeah.
It's easy over here. Like, I just like
I
heal.
my co-tank asked shortly before the tier started to switch his main. He was preparing Blood DK and Vengeance Demon Hunter, and he was like, "I would rather play Vengeance Demon Hunter right now." And I was like, "I don't understand why you want to play Vengeance Demon Hunter right now, but go
Squish
for it."
had a
But I understand now.
He swapped to Vengeance Demon Hunter the 3 days before the X Pack dropped. He was like, "I'm gonna do Vengeance." I was like, "Okay."
I like it. Awesome. Awesome. Well, what is, oh God, Ouija, sorry, Ouija. That's not how you spell we, is it? I'm gonna Google this after this. Thank you very much for the question. Sounds like Soul Crusher or Soul Crush. Just sucks for Brewmasters. Sorry about that.
It
Um,
really does.
There's
but
not
yeah,
really much you can do about it other than just cycle your cooldowns and then get B-resed.
exactly. Awesome. But yeah, thank you, Ouija, for the questions. Yeah, you asked so. So thank you. And yeah, I think that's all we have Q&A wise. But if you guys have any questions as you're listening, send them to myself, send them to Emerson. Like I said, we answer anything, um, pretty much everything. I don't think there's a question we haven't answered.
There is one. There is one that we took off the list, but
You're not supposed to shut up. Then they're gonna know. They're gonna get angry
sorry.
with us.
There's
Listen,
one. We've been doing this for almost 6 months. There's one.
un- unbelievable. I can't. Now that person's gonna know, and I'm gonna have to get the angry PM from him about how we didn't ask his question after I just said we answer all the questions. So,
I don't have to deal with the PM.
oh my god. And in any event, thank you for your questions. It's great. I love them. God damn it. Okay, sorry. I'm done.
All right. Well, I think that is going to just about wrap it up for today. If you enjoyed this podcast and you want to support it and all the other work that we do over at the Peak of Serenity, whether it's class guides, raid guides, working on podcast, or helping out in Discord,
Kiev's dungeon guides. The
Kiosks,
dungeon
dungeon
guides.
guides, and raid guides.
So actually,
Which
real
need to
quick
be updated.
before we do the outro, I use those when working on working through some of the dungeons.
Oh,
Actually, 100%. Like I was like immediately like one of my tanks like I don't know what to do here. I'm like, look, go here. This is how we do this. Easy, boom. So they've been helpful even for me, and I'm terrible. So
They will continue to be updated. So my goal is to get through raid progression, get all the raid guides updated for Mythic, for tank specific Mythic Prog, and then we're gonna do a dungeon guide overhaul because I'm gonna probably start pushing higher and higher keys, and we'll start to get some more of that information and stuff in there. So
nice,
keep checking them out for updates.
yeah.
awesome. And sorry, Emerson, I
I,
ruined your
I have
outro.
used less of the dungeon guides because I, not gonna lie, I have not had a good time doing keys, and I just don't want to do keys, so I haven't been doing them, and thus I don't need guides. um, but I have used Kia's raid guides. They're very good. You should check them out, and you can do that over at ecoserenity.com. And if you want to support everything that's on there and all the other work that we do on the site, you can do that over at our Patreon at patreon.com/peakofserenity. And as always, we really appreciate your support, whether it's coming and hanging out in chat during the show, or hanging out in Discord in one of the lounges, or helping answer questions in one of the questions channels. Lots of different ways to support the site beyond just throwing money our way. Um, anyway, thank you all for listening, and we will see you next week. Bye.
Bye.